Hey everybody, how's it going? Welcome to the Healthy Homes Workshop. Hello, one and all. Thanks for your patience. Yeah. Hey Bern. Hey Bennett. Hey Betsy. If you guys can hear us, would you mind just giving us a thumbs up or yes, we can hear you. Oh look, Bern responds. So it looks like I think they can hear us. So checking in from Austin, Texas. Hey Carrie. All clear. Good. Hey, Steph. How's it going, guys? Awesome. Well, sorry for the little bit of a late start there. We're just trying to iron some things out, but cool. We're really excited for this workshop. It's going to be amazing. There's always so much that I learn in every single one of these type of sessions that Ben gives, and this one's going to be way more in depth than any of the other ones. So we're really excited for that.
Yeah, if you guys were able to attend the Global Tiny House Conference, you probably, hopefully, had a chance to hear Ben chat a little bit about what he's going to be diving much deeper in today. But it's something that Zach and I are definitely passionate about as well, and see huge. There's a huge gap, I guess, in the industry when it comes to building healthy homes with good techniques, good materials, and having just a proper understanding of building science and just all the above of creating a really truly healthy home that will last a long time. So I think this is a much needed message and education that hopefully we can continue to learn more about and share with everyone in the industry, so we can continue to up the standards throughout the country and the world, really. So we're excited, Ben, to have you here with us, and we're going to be kind of in the background if you need anything, but otherwise we're going to let you take it away and have a good time doing it. So thank you, everyone, for being here.
Awesome. Yeah, we're super excited, and can't wait to hear it all. Thanks so much, Ben.
Thanks, guys. Awesome. Hey, everyone. It's always weird doing these talks when I can't hear anyone, but I've turned the comments on this time. At the last conference, it was pretty funny. I had a terrible headset, and we're just dealing with some more headset issues, so hopefully everyone can hear me okay. I'm just going to do a screen share to start it off. Well, actually be on all the time. So this is, I was just rearranging some slides. One of the main teaching things that I do is like a two-day tiny house workshop in person, and so we sort of do that deep dive into everything tiny house, mostly for people who are wanting to build it themselves. So what I've done is sort of tried to collate that weekend and got rid of the stuff that's not relevant right now for us, and put it into a slideshow that's going to be 2 hours, 3 hours. I'm not sure. This is the first time that I've done this sort of length. So we'll see how that goes. But we'll just, let's see here. I'm going to go over this side. Click in. Usually what we'll do, and I thought it's relevant now because we're talking about, I think a healthy home is just as important as a healthy body and a healthy mind. And it's become the norm, certainly in Canada. New Zealand, it happens culturally anyways, but always acknowledging the people whose land we're on. So I'd start by acknowledging that I'm an uninvited guest, especially because I'm Australian who's been uninvited to Canada on these unceded territories of the Coast Salish people. I'm in North Vancouver, and the Coast Salish run all the way along this side of the West Coast. It's their traditional territory. I'd like to express my gratitude to the Squamish Nation and the Tsleil-Waututh Nation. We value the opportunity to learn, live, and share our educational experiences on this traditional territory. It always gets me a little bit choked up, but it's really nice to make that acknowledgement and then also just breathe into the space where we're at right now. A little bit of housekeeping straight up. I'm not a tech nerd. I'm not used to looking at multiple screens. I've got the slideshow over here, and then I'm watching myself and the comments on this screen. But one of the things that we do in my workshops is, like, if I'm just rattling on and I've lost somebody, or if I've gone too far, I'm getting too technical for some people, I'd invite you to write jargon in capital letters in the comments section so I can like hold up. Maybe I could share a mic. We could try that as we go along, just to make sure that everyone's clear about everything that I'm teaching or talking about. And so, yeah, we do that in person. It's like, boom, hand up, jargon. Don't wait for me if the hand's up, just jargon. So it's kind of a technique that we've been using for a while. And then questions as well. I think we can go through questions. If I spot them there, then I'd certainly like to address them as we go along, as long as it's about the topic that we're kind of on at that time. Otherwise, I'd like to really open up the group to questions that could bounce back and forth towards the end. But do feel free to ask questions. If I don't get to it, if you could just hold on to that question and paste it again at the end so I don't have to like scroll through looking for them. I'm not sure how many people we've got here. Oh, 19, that's pretty good. That's easy. Let's see now. Introduction, I'll do a quick intro about myself. And then breaks. Yeah, I mean, obviously take off whenever you need to, of course. But I think I'm going to actually do some like scheduled breaks as we go along. So it might be between 45 minutes to an hour, whenever what we're talking about sort of hits where a break makes sense, so I can use the bathroom and get a snack or whatever as well. So we'll have like 5-minute, 10-minute break or something like that. So that's that. And yeah, what we're going to get into today, I mentioned the jargons questions thing before. I'll do an intro about myself, and then we'll talk a little bit about where your journey is or you're hoping to go, and try and like create a little bit of context around that for yourself. Money stress. I had a couple of slides. There's a friend in New Zealand who did a really great little bit, and we'll see if that video works. Then I'm going to talk about design and permaculture, and then we'll talk about thermal bridging, insulation, ventilation, electrical material choices, and then some Q&A. It's like it's going to be hopefully not too all over the place for those of you who like to have more structure. Unseated. Thanks, Bern. Okay, thanks, Steph. I believe this is going to be up for you to look at later, so it's all good. So yeah, that's me. I did an electrical trade after finishing school, and I'd worked in theater and doing lighting and sound as a kid. So I was like, really wanted to do electrical because that would mean I could be a roadie for bands and stuff like that. And that's what I did. And I did work as a roadie for a while, and at the same time as doing my apprenticeship and then moving in through the electrical trade. I moved to England, worked as an electrician there, and then worked for a carpentry company who did kind of alternative building. I mean, they did some treehouse stuff, but then a whole bunch of just regular renovations. And carpentry was actually always my passion. I just did electrical because it was a better choice than some of the apprenticeships that are available in Australia. So the carpentry then led me back to Australia, and I did some house flipping and all those kind of things. And then at some point, I was on a particular job when I was back in Australia and had a toxic shock event, which changed the path of how I build, how buildings affected me, and these kind of things. I'd always had eczema, and I still do. So I think that along with this event that I had was it just changed my mindset about how I build things and being more intentional about the things that we put into buildings and my own health as well, of course. And I think through that journey as well, I found myself just way more connected to the kind of clients that are also interested in these things, as opposed to doing these, soulless commercial projects as a tradesperson. So that's kind of what I'm that's where how I got to this point, sitting in front of you guys. Apart from that, personally, I've got two little ones, 10 and 8, and they go to the Vancouver Waldorf School, which conveniently is right out our back gate. So this is my home office here, and the kids toddle off to school, and my partner goes to work at the same school. And so we've got a nice little life here in Lynn Valley. And then our workshop, where we build tiny houses, is an hour down the road. So a couple of times a week I do that commute, and I go there and help with the building stuff, which is great. I like to keep my hands on the job, and yeah, that's kind of that. Oh, yeah, here's another slide. I guess this is just what I was talking about. Electrician, carpenter, right. And then I got into natural building. And I'll talk a little bit about natural building, and then natural building led into earthships. I'm not sure if you've heard of these, but I'll do a little bit of talk about earthships because I definitely incorporate some of those principles into design. And then I got into the portable building teams. Yes, I know earthships, but they are great. Okay, sorry for the sudden graphic image here, but yeah, that's a photo of me on the right. There was a job site I was on, and I basically had this same. This was the only photo I had, but I had this same reaction on my skin. I'll move the slide so no one's triggered staring at a gruesome photo. But I was basically in hospital for a couple of days on a cortisone treatment, and all my skin fell off, and it was Freddy Krueger for a week or so. And what happens with that kind of a toxic shock event? What it was it was a 2-part paint that they were putting onto a warehouse floor, so it chemically hardens, and it was just a really, really strong odor. And my body went into that shock, so my organs and everything started freaking out because they thought that I was going to die, and they tried to protect themselves by, doing that. Now, the problem that I had after that, and still a little bit, I'm fairly sensitive to VOCs, volatile organic compounds, and that smell of fresh paint that's not VOC free, or plumbing glue, or these kinds of things. I do have to work with it sometimes, and I'm certainly around it, and it's become less and less and less. But basically, what happens with that kind of reaction is your body, even with a small trace of a smell like that, my body was going back into this really strong reaction to try and protect itself. So it took years and years for me to get to this stage where I'm at now, where even a small smell of plumbing glue doesn't blow my skin up. So this is a toxic shock event, and another one that is probably the most common is a cumulative reaction or toxicity, where I think milk is probably the best. Milk mold. Some people drink milk their whole life, and then one day, boom, they're just allergic and they're lactose intolerant. It's happened to a friend of mine last year, and it was amazing. I mean, he was actually drinking milk all the time, and then suddenly he was allergic. So his body was dealing with it until it just said, no, that's the end. So a lot of people have that with mold. Cedar is another one, actually, that a lot of people can tolerate for a long time, but then eventually the body somehow reaches a threshold and says, no, cedar. And they have a similar sort of red or trouble breathing. Cedar is an amazing plant, and the foundation of a lot of First Nations culture. And I mean, the reason is because it's so powerful, which does make some people allergic to it. Anyway, that's my story. I just slid onto this slide because I didn't want to have that photo up for too long. But this is what I was talking about at the start, just about where you're trying to find yourself within this healthy space. trying to decipher between greenwashing and the whole sort of green, sustainable, blah blah blah. All of these things, I'm not going to prescribe anything because everyone's so different. Some people I talk to, their main goal is just to recycle and reuse, and that's like a really green way to do things. If you're efficient with it, I guess. The other advantage of recycling and reusing is if there is any off-gassing that was going to happen to products, it's probably already happened. One of the I might have an image later, but the tiny house that I've got currently was mostly recycled and salvaged materials, so that the drawers in the kitchen and everything were just beautiful old American cherry bedroom furniture. And so the off-gassing of the lacquers and stuff that were on there happened like 40, 50 years ago. And I considered that just fine to use. The other one is eco or green products. The recycled and reused materials are not for everyone. There's like a rustic look that usually comes with them and a hell of a lot of extra labor. So then we've got these eco sort of green materials, which, you know, as a tiny house builder, I do use quite a lot of, because people do like their homes to feel brand new and also to be non-toxic. And there's tons of these products around, and some of them are marked, you know, eco or green, and they've got the pictures of the forest on them or whatever else. But you really do have to look into how green they actually are. Some people's motivation might be how their energy use. We're talking about the health of the planet a little bit more there, and building a health efficient home, double glazed windows, all that stuff that we'll talk about. And then the healthy non-toxic thing is also the finishes that you put on things, and we'll talk a little bit more about that. I'm going to turn my heater on. Excuse me. Okay, so that's that. I just want to look at, see if there's any comments here. That shit, we'll get there. Greenwashing, good one. And Lisa S answered for Betsy. That's great. Greenwashing, when companies label a product that's green, but it's not actually a mistake. So I guess greenwashing, the term came from brainwashing. So the companies that are just trying to right, yeah, that's great. Thanks, Zach. Companies that are trying to convince you that their product's green, when it's totally not. One thing that I wanted to talk about a little bit, because I think with healthy homes, in my experience, it's not all just the building materials and this and that, but the health of the occupant in the house. And there's, you know, we could talk about that a little bit with permaculture as well, in the zone 0, which we'll get to. This graphic's actually ass backwards, but essentially how our housing's gone from, let's say, 1950, the average was 1,000 square feet. And then we've just been getting bigger and bigger and bigger. So as far as the planet's resources go, homes are not sustainable and not healthy for the planet. And so I think this tiny house movement, downsizing, way less materials being used in the build itself, and just us using less resources of the planet. Definitely thought it's worth a mention. The other part is this invisible structures that we have, which is having a mortgage. Of course, if you've got a huge house, then you're going to have a big mortgage. And there's a certain amount of stress that comes with that. And we know that stress is not good for our health either. This mortgage thing, Latin for death pledge. Now, I'm going to see if this video works. I'm just going to run it. I may skip forward a little bit, but it's just a quick talk about running the numbers on a tiny house, and how that can affect your stress levels. If there's no sound, let me know, and maybe I could talk through it. Oops. All that build up. Now it's not going to go. Let's skip it. It's not a big deal. What I can do, I've got a piece of paper here. I'll write on the. I'll send you the links for that video. Link to running the numbers video. So it's a really nice, simple video about running the numbers on what a regular house might cost, what your down payment might be for that, how long it takes to pay it off, how much a tiny house is, and what you could do with that kind of money or how it could affect your life in a better way. Not a big deal. We've got tons of stuff to get through. Okay, so now we're into some of the design stuff. And again, I've just compressed the... Yeah, I'll show you the links. I'll find it. Probably in order for me, permaculture being number one. If I was to subscribe to a religion, it might be permaculture. If there's such a thing as a permaculture religion, so we'll get into that a little bit. We'll do a permaculture in 3 or 4 slides. The actual permaculture design certificate is 2 weeks, and no matter what your background, it's a life-changing thing to do. Earthship principles, I do use them quite a lot. It's a little bit harder with tiny houses because they're movable, and so much of the Earthship principles is based on where you are in the world and the sun. So we'll talk about that. Natural building, I'll show you a few natural building techniques or methods. Healthy homes, passive house. The passive house standard is becoming the building code here in Canada. It's basically the building code in Germany, and we'll talk about what that means and how we could apply that to tiny houses. Living Building Challenge, it's another great standard to work from. There's all kinds of different green building standards, but the Living Building Challenge is by far my favorite. And then I'm not going to go into them too much on this talk, but feng shui, biomimicry, sacred geometry, parametric design. A Pattern Language is a really great book. When I'm doing build workshops that run for a while, I usually read a passage out of the Pattern Language each morning. Golden Ratio, I can talk about that. And anthroposophical architecture, which is this amazing dude who invented biodynamic gardening. He also started the Waldorf system of education, and he was just one of these people from history who's a bit of a visionary, and I really appreciate his asymmetric architecture. Okay, so we're going to dive into the permaculture thing. It seems funny to do a permaculture in 3 slides, but I'm going to give it a shot. You can see 3 circles there, hopefully. The one at the top is the planet. The one on the right-hand side is the people. And then on the left, we've got sharing the surplus. And so they're the 3 guiding principles of permaculture. We take care of the planet, we take care of the people, and we share the surplus. Now the huge, Rudolf Steiner, exactly. Bennett was just saying that it's called I'm going back now for a second. It's called Waldorf School in North America. All of the rest of the world calls these type of anthroposophical. We're going back to anthroposophical architecture. It was designed by Rudolf Steiner. Rudolf Steiner is the visionary guy that I'm talking about. So the rest of the world calls them Steiner schools, and in North America, it's Waldorf schools. Thanks, Bennett. Okay, so the thing about permaculture with these 3 pillars, and the reason that I love it so much is in our modern day society with this system of business where we require a 10% growth for businesses every year, especially if they're publicly listed, blah, blah, blah. And you'll hear in business a lot of the time they're talking about triple P, bottom line: people, planet, and profit. And it's the profit part that's really going to take us down. And when we talk about permaculture, we talk about people, planet, and sharing the surplus. And that's the bit that's almost the most challenging, because it is a fundamental shift in how we think about things. But I think it's critical for how we move forward as a species. And that's probably the main thing about permaculture that I really appreciate. So, and it's always a classic, what is permaculture? You know, there's almost everything that we try to put into boxes. You can define it, you can look it up on Wikipedia, and it's going to give you a nice, simple description. Permaculture's got a million descriptions. But one of the co-founders, Bill Mollison, says the conscious design and maintenance of agriculturally productive ecosystems, which have the diversity, stability, and resilience of a natural ecosystem. So permaculture is not a monocrop. If we're around the lower mainland here where I live, there's tons of blueberries. It's perfect blueberry growing area. And you just see miles and miles and miles and miles of blueberries. Now the blueberries need pollen. They need bees to pollinate them. And now the beekeepers won't send their bees there unless these blueberry farms have wildflowers in amongst the blueberries, because it was affecting the bees and the bees were dying out. And that's an example of trying to create diverse ecosystems, humans creating diverse ecosystems that make them more resilient for the other parts of the ecosystem that they rely on. I hope that makes sense. The other one is by the guy that I did my PDC with, Jarvan. Crazy gardening brain, and a brain in general. Is an awesome dude to hang out with. Permaculture is an ethical science based on whole system design methodology that creates a regenerative, sustainable human habitat. So it's accepting that we're part of this ecosystem, and that we're not, just because we've got these big brains doesn't mean that we're on top of the pyramid. We're part of the whole thing. Okay, and these are the basic design principles of permaculture. When I'm doing tiny house design course, I hand out a checklist, and at the end of the first day, I give it as homework once we get into the design portion. And I try and see what people come back with using these principles in relation to their tiny house design. So observing and interacting. So maybe that's got to do with where your tiny house is being parked and how it's going to be parked with regards to nature. Catching and storing energy. You could say water catchment off the roof. Obtaining a yield. Does your tiny house add to the landscape? Does it help with anything? Are you growing food while you're there? Blah, blah, blah. Applying self-regulation. Apply self-regulation and apply feedback. So I guess if something's not working, at least recognizing it and then trying to fix that. Use and value renewable resources and services. Produce no waste. It's a big one. I'm not sure if we go into it, but the biggest one there for me is composting toilets. We've got this strange systems that have been created over the years where we do our business in the toilet, then we flush it away with perfectly good drinking water, usually to a plant somewhere where we'll nuke it, and then spew it out to the ocean. It's just a crazy system. Producing no waste for me is using a composting toilet and finishing off that nutrient cycle ourselves, rather than wasting all these resources just dealing with it. It's like deal with your own shit. Maybe that's a permaculture term. Can you use composting toilets in North Van? Not legally. No, you cannot. Integrate rather than segregate. So become part of the system that you're putting yourself into. Use and value diversity. I love that one. Use the edges and value the marginal. Say at the edges where the action is. And you can see that in any environment, really. If you look at a gutter, that's really where everything from the road is collecting in the gutter, and then something's happening. It's going somewhere else. Or you'll see like plants that aren't supposed to grow. You'll see them on the side of the road sometimes where it's just a random plant there. The edges are super valuable for sure. And then creatively use and respond to change. It's massive. That's one of the ideals that I'm trying to instill in my kids, especially in this day and age where everything's up in the air as far as our environment. And so being able to respond to that change is super important. Permaculture as a whole system design. Okay, we've got a circle here, and on the top half of the circle is visible structures, animals, plant systems, infrastructure, built structures, water landscape. And below there is invisible structures. I think I mentioned it briefly before. Trade and finance. Our money system is an invisible structure. I mean, we might have visible assets, but the money that's attached to them and the finance that's attached to them is not actually necessary if we all knew how to share. Education, culture, laws and codes, completely invisible. Land access, let's say borders. There's a border an hour from here to Washington State. It's an invisible structure. Okay. I think this is the last part of permaculture, which is it's not all to do with gardening, but it's talking about how we zone out our lives in a blast radius from our mind, which is zone 0, 0. And so how do we keep these ecosystems healthy and interacting with each other? And zone 0, 0 is a very interesting one. It's mental health. How do we take care of our mental health? Are we getting enough sleep? Blah, blah, blah. Can we apply permaculture principles to that? Of course we can. Zone 0 is the house that you're in and the relationship that you might have with the people in that house, and how you move around that house, those kind of things. Zone 1 is the area that you need to observe more often. If you've got a human manure compost pile or a regular compost, then it's probably going to be in zone 1 because you're going to use it every day. It's where you're going to park your car or your bicycle. It's where you're going to have herbs that you go out and pick and put straight into your smoothie, whatever it is. That's usually what zone 1 is. Sometimes you'll have actually in zone 1 some fruit trees, say, if you've got an orchard or something. You might have a couple of fruit trees that you can see how they're doing, when they're blossoming, when they're ready, that otherwise are planted in zone 2 or 3, so that if you don't have to go to zone 2 or 3 to see how those crops are doing. But yeah, zone 2 is less managed areas. Zone 3 is areas that you visit from time to time, maybe wheat, hay, straw, those kind of things. Cattle. Zone 4 is wild food gathering, wood cutting for fuel. And zone 5 is unmanaged areas, natural areas. They're the places that the backcountry, hiking stuff that's not affected by us. And a lot of people use zone 5 as the place to go and learn what's actually happening and try and bring some of those natural systems back closer to our zones. So there you go, permaculture. Pretty sure that's it. Yeah. And like I said, doing a PDC, a permaculture design certificate, is awesome. If anyone gets a chance, if you can block out a couple of weeks of time, it's worth it on so many levels. Okay. Earthships. How are we doing? We'll look here. Cool. Everyone's listening. No questions. This is an earthship that I built in New Zealand, or helped to build. It's an enormous amount of labor. I was I did go down to New Mexico and worked with Earthship Biotexture for a while. It's definitely been a benefit of being an electrician and unqualified but carpenter is I get to contact companies. Well, I don't do it so much anymore, but I just contacted Earthship Biotexture and asked if they needed an electrician carpenter, and of course they did. So I went down and worked with them for a while. I saw a lot of great things that they were doing, but I also saw some things that they weren't doing super well. They were doing it well for the climate that they were in, which is Mexico. But with my experience doing these other things, saw a couple of holes in their design. So I worked with them for a while and I learned a lot there. But I have done some hybrid Earthship designs for people like this one. I wonder if there's a... that's okay. I was just wondering if there might be a clicker so I could point on the picture. But if you see on the front left, that's typical greenhouse for an Earthship. And then the front right, we had it more open. And this is a little bit more about not subscribing to one particular architectural philosophy or design philosophy in particular. The reason that we left the front open is because the view back this way was just epic. We didn't want to crowd it out by a greenhouse. Anyway, this one's called Earthship Tita Matanga. And there's an episode on it on my website. Maybe I can share that link. It seems like some people are interested in Earthships. Earthship. I'm just writing some notes for link. They made a TV show about this one on Grand Designs, it's called. So I can send you that. Okay, Earthship design principles. There's 6 principles in Earthship. One is thermal solar heating and cooling. So that means that in the northern hemisphere here, we're going to have the whole front of the Earthship facing south, or maybe 10 degrees east of south to pick up a little bit more of the morning sun. And that way the sun is doing the majority of our heating. For example, and it's maybe an example of New Mexico. New Mexico is it's something ridiculous, like 350 days of sun per year. So it's super easy to keep those Earthships really warm, even in the middle of winter. Principle 2, solar and wind electricity, so generating your own power. Number 3, contains sewage treatment. And I think I've got a graphic of that. But again, it's taking care of your own business. Number 4, natural and recycled materials. So we're going to try and build out of natural and recycled materials. And the main one in a standard Earthship is tires, using car tires as a recycled material. 5, harvesting the water, so rainwater collection off your roof. And then 6 is incorporating food production within all these systems. It doesn't have to be inside the house completely, but that's a component of it. So 6 principles to Earthship design. Now this graphic's a little bit pixelated, but if you see on the top right there's an arrow that's representing the sun. That's our solar energy. And so that's coming in, it's pointing right at a solar panel there, which is on an angled roof. Earthships face south. That's correct, Steph. Unless you're in the southern hemisphere, in which case they'll face north. It's super hard work filling those tires with dirt. Yeah, it's an enormous amount of labor going into these buildings. Okay, so the sun's coming in, and that's more like a winter sun angle that we're looking at. Depending on where you are in the world, usually there's a winter sun angle, which is going to be coming in lower. That's also heating up the greenhouse. You can see there's plants in there, and then there's another wall, and that's into the interior space, the living space. So the greenhouse essentially creates this conditioned environment where the sun is heating it up, and it's almost like having 4 panes of window between the outside and your living space behind. So if we're able to heat this space up between the greenhouse or in the greenhouse, then it's much easier to keep the inside space warm. So that's in the winter sun angle. You can see a cloud there with the rain collection off the roof. Now, just below the roof, you'll see that there's they're representing car tires. That's a berm wall, or a retaining wall, basically. And that's the back of the house. That's all thermal mass, which is compacted dirt inside those tires. When the tires are pounded out, they key into each other and become this insanely strong area. The sun and the temperature of the house actually warms that group of tires up and the dirt that's behind it, and then that's where the insulation starts. So this huge block of thermal mass is able to be heated, and sometimes it takes quite a while to heat up, like a year, before the moisture and everything becomes stable and it's a stable heat source. But once it is, there's no, close the door, we live in a tent. Did you grow up in a tent kind of situation? That's where your heat source is, and it's always emitting and balancing out the heat. The wall behind the tires is usually about 2 feet before the insulation. Yes, let's talk about the tires, Betsy. There's definitely some leaching of I'm sorry. See, Earthship Biotecture would definitely say there's not, because they've gone through their 20,000 mile, usable cycle. I wouldn't grow potatoes in a tire. I wouldn't do it. But the idea with putting them in the back wall here and then compounding them with dirt and then putting a layer over them they're actually quite dry. So most of the leaching happens when there's a chance for those tires to break down more, like if they're getting wet. That's, in the case of growing potatoes in tires, which some people do, I see. If you're watering them, and then there's definitely a chance to leak. There for sure can be off-gassing still, though, after they've done their 20,000 miles or whatever it is. So if that's a concern, then there is other designs of Earthships without tires. I've done a couple. But it's a consideration. The other consideration with the tires, as far as the healthy home goes, and as far as electromagnetic radiation goes, is all of them have steel rims in the tires. So I usually, when I was working on them, I'm usually running the power under the floor and then just up to the back wall of the tires instead of along, because those steel rims of the tires are able to pick up some of the electromagnetic frequency from the cables, and the whole tire wall can actually have a low level EMF frequency. It's like stacking up a bunch of coils, electrical coils with electricity running through them. So that's one consideration with the tires as well. I'm not actually a fan of the tires at all. It makes for an enormous amount of labor. I think we recycle tires, or it is possible to have a better use of tires for recycling these days. But I do appreciate how strong they are and how cheap they are. They're free. How's the roof constructed? Generally, you can use trusses. You can use I-beams, wooden I-beams. Earthship Biotecture usually they call them vigas, but it's essentially big tree poles. And then they'll have a header at the front. And then over the top of that, how you're layering it up. Generally, they're using tongue and groove over the top of those poles, and then they'll put insulation above that, and then more roof, or the roof over the top of that. But it's pretty much a general, a normal roof system, or it can be a combination of any. The soil bag houses, rammed earth. Yep, they could totally be used. Yep. What are the layers? The layers in the roof, Inca? The layers in the roof. Okay, yeah, that's a good point. So the top layer is just going to be Usually metal. If you're going to recycle water off a roof, then it's best to use a metal roof. So below metal will be plywood. Below that would be insulation. And usually they're using foam in this particular model. So however many inches of foam insulation. Below that would be tongue and groove, or maybe a house wrap of some kind, or a roof felt. Then below that would be tongue and groove. Below that, you can see the squiggly lines. That's like I don't know, 8 inches, and that's the viga or the roof pole. And so the total thickness of that might be depending on your insulation, anywhere between 12 inches and, I mean, how much insulation? 2 feet. So 300 millimeters and 600. That's pretty thick though. But about 300 millimeters or more. I'm just saying that because Rinker's in India, and India uses the metric system. Okay, so the water comes off the roof, and yeah, exactly. Yeah, 600 would be a lot. I have seen people insulate roofs with straw bale, which is why I'm like, it could be thick. So the water comes off the roof, and then it falls into a gutter, and then what they call a scupper, which is just like a leaf filter, basically. And then it's going to go into that water storage tank at the back, which is buried. So it's buried to keep that water temperature a little bit stable, so it doesn't freeze. It's also good we have to keep your water out of sunlight if you don't want algae to grow. And it's just a good way to keep your storage, water storage, protected generally. Most of those tanks can be made out of plastic, so if there's a fire, then all your water tanks would melt. So it's a nice design feature. It also keeps the thermal mass section there, which is insulated on the right-hand side of the water tank. It helps to keep that stable as well, having the berm at the back. So the water runs in and it goes to they call it a WAM, water management module, which is a series of filters. Some people don't use them. Depends on where you are. So then your water is firstly used in your shower, your drinking water, washing machine, whatever. And then the overflow of that goes into the greenhouse at the front. And so you've got this garden bed with water at the bottom of it. So it's called a wicking style waterbed, garden bed. And from the lower levels of the garden, there's usually a little pit, like a sump. It's got a pump in it, and it will recycle that water back because the garden's cleaned it pretty well. And then you can use that for your toilet. And then from the toilet, it goes outside, and ideally is being dealt with outside in a septic field, which is also good for growing fruit trees and stuff like that. So the really great design with this, one of the nice things with how the water is used in an earthship design is you use it 4 times, the water. So you're using it to wash yourself, then you're using it to feed the plants, then you're using it again to flush the toilet, and then it's going outside again to a septic field and hopefully feeding more plants. And so again, where this earthship model was designed by a guy called Mike Reynolds, New Mexico has like, I don't know, maybe 6 inches of rain all year, including snow. So being able to use the water 4 times is critical. And water becoming one of our most precious commodities. So it's nice for that. What else about this design? Oh yeah, if you see the black at the bottom, that's the ground, and then on the left-hand side, just a little bit up from there, there's a tube or a tunnel. It's called an earth tube or a cooling tube, and so that sites out inside the house, and then it runs out to the back of the berm on the bottom left of the screen there. And so in summer, when we've got the sun angle coming directly down on the house, the one that's shown right now is a winter sun angle, so it's hitting the house at a horizontal angle. Basically, the summer sun's a vertical angle, but your house is still going to heat up, especially the greenhouse. So that's why there's a roof vent at the top of the greenhouse, and then another operable window at the top of your interior wall. Now, once they're open, the greenhouse it's going to get hot. Hot air rises, so you can see that arrow where the heat from the greenhouse is rising out. And what that does is it creates a draw. And so we've got this convection situation happening with the airflow. And so that cooling tube, it has a little hatch at the back of the berm. You open that hatch, and then you open up to the living space at the front, and that picks up the temperature of the ground, and it creates a draw from the greenhouse, and it's a passive air conditioning system, and it really works. The best example was we were building an Earthship in Australia. I could probably send you that. It's called Earthship Iron Bank. It was super hot where we were building. So it was somewhat of a heat wave, like 42 degrees centigrade. I don't know what that is in Fahrenheit. Let's say 100 plus degrees Fahrenheit. It was crazy. And we were sitting in front of the cooling tube, and it was like, if it's already 40 degrees outside, then 20, 25 degrees seems really cool. We go and sit in front of that earth tube, cooling tube, and it was the best place to be. So this passive design really works. The temperature of the earth generally is about 10 degrees. So it works really well. That's that. I think that's pretty good as far as Earthship principles go and how they all work in combination. Natural building. I think people that have sensitivities to building materials, if you've got the luxury of land to build on, and you want to build a tiny house that's not on wheels, then natural building's pretty much where it's at. And there's so many options within the materials that you can use. I really like the idea of a nest, where no matter where you're building, you treat it like a nest, like a bird's nest, and the materials come from a short distance around. And so the house would represent, the materials that are available within your area. Building on the top left, we built at an Earthship workshop while we were waiting for some materials to come in. So that's cob walls, and then light earth as well. On the bottom left is a building style. It's called Eco Nest. Robert Nan Laporte. That's their that's their company, and it's a Japanese timber frame with a straw clay infill, and those walls are a foot thick. And Paula Laporte was a big inspiration for me in her book, Subscriptions for a Healthy Home. I'll send a link for that as well. She's an architect and a building biologist, I think, and has a really great book about healthy building. And it happens that she partnered with an epic Japanese timber framer, so that's what they do. On the right-hand side there's a bathroom of a natural building that we did, and the material on the wall there around the shower is called Tadilact, and it's a Moroccan. It was developed in Morocco a long time ago for their water storage and bathhouses, and it's a breathable, waterproof wall. So it's a lime plaster over clay generally, and then it's burnished in with get a rock basically, and spray it with olive oil soap generally at different consistencies, and you just keep working that soap into the lime. Chemical reaction happens, and it becomes waterproof. It's hugely labor intensive, but you're able to get some really amazing shapes with all of that. Subscriptions to a healthy home, Seth. I've got it written down here, so I'll send a bunch of links, or else I'll get them to everyone after. I've got the book around here somewhere. Our company for the bottom left is called EcoNest. Seen any natural, locally sourced, movable tiny houses? Weight is an issue. Yeah. That's what got me into tiny houses in the first place, is I was in this natural building realm, and then someone asked me to build a healthy tiny home, or a non-toxic tiny home. And so it was kind of a convergence of where I'd come from in the regular construction and electrical world from natural building, and then I was like, I love to build. And I was starting to follow the movement a little bit with Jay Schaefer, and so yeah, when this woman asked me to build one, we did it. Weight is an issue, especially when we're talking about thermal mass and clay. But I think I could pull up her build a little bit, and we can talk about those elements. Let me see. It's called Poplar on my website. Poplar Tiny House. It's not the most natural that I've built, but we use some more of natural building style elements. Burn. Have you looked at biofiber hempcrete blocks? I know of them. I've not looked. I haven't. Well, yeah, I know that they exist, but I haven't had any use to look into using them. We did use hempcrete on an Earthship in Australia a while ago to do these vaulted domes, and it was an interesting exercise. We didn't have much luck with moisture. They did mold a little bit, and a little bit of mold is not good enough. It has to be no mold. So I'm not poo-pooing hempcrete, but that was a few years ago. I'm sure they've figured it out. There's a little bit of greenwashing back to this thing with hempcrete. Hemp is an amazing product. There's no question. And the best thing that hempcrete has going for it is it's got the name hemp in the word, because people know that it's an amazing plant. Generally, they're still using concrete though, or cement, Portland cement, as a binding agent, and I think we can do better. Yeah, I think hemp could be used in combination with something that's a little bit more sustainable. Concrete's the most unsustainable product that we have. The amount of energy it takes to make Portland cement is insane. So yeah. But I think biofibers are certainly like part of the solution in construction materials, because we have them everywhere. We really do. There's a house in Souk. Yeah, there is an EcoNest in Souk. And the guy that I did this build with on the bottom left, I can't remember his name, but it's his house. It wasn't Robert Laporte, but I think he's a registered EcoNest guy. So yeah. Rammed Earth House. I think we're going to talk about Rammed Earth. How are we going? An hour already. Okay, I'm going to keep going. Straw bale. Straw bale is an amazing insulation material. It's pretty stable. I like it. So as far as building a nest for yourself, if there's straw going around where you live, go straw bale. It's really a great material to build from. It's like Lego. If you design it well and don't go too crazy with some curvilinear thing, which straw bales are usually square, then I really like straw bale as a building material. Cob's really great to put over the top of straw bale, but using as an entire wall, you want to be in a fairly arid climate. It works. There's tons of cob buildings in BC, and one of my favorite natural builders ever, his name's Pat Henneberry. He's all about cob, from cobworks.ca. You can do some amazing things with cob, but it's very hard to insulate in cold climates. Timber frame, that's just, big timbers creating the structure, and then your infill can be whatever. There is a distinction in timber frame between Western or Japanese And Western timber frame is essentially, let me get a prop here. This is a Western timber frame. There's a post, a beam, and a knee brace. So Western timber frame will have triangles in it. And a Japanese timber frame will have a post, a beam, you see around my fingers, and then it will have a brace, a second brace. Now, Japanese is by far my favorite, and the reason is we're in a seismic zone here, and a Japanese timber frame can move. It's designed to be able to move, and then once the earthquake stops, it settles down and generally is stronger than before the earthquake. Everything keys into each other. Western timber frame, which Western engineers really like because it's really rigid and doesn't move, in a bad earthquake, it's going to break, and you have to replace it. Look at these buildings in Japan that have been standing forever through all kinds of earthquakes. So it was really interesting when I started learning about timber framing that this big distinction there. Unfortunately, they're a little hard to get engineered over here. Pin joints, yep. Both would have a pin joint. Straw bale is pretty good in earthquakes too. Yep. Tire walls are really good too. Yep. They take the movement. What's not good in earthquake is a square corner, because we've got the earthquake coming in, and it's hard for that energy to move around a square corner. So having slightly curved walls as well is nice for earthquake. But it also depends on the earthquake. The earthquake that happened in Christchurch a few years ago, the reason it was so devastating is because it was 2G of force sideways and 1G up. So there's not a whole lot that you can do if your house actually leaves the ground. But that said, straw bale and these things do key into each other quite nicely. Okay, light earth. This is typically straw clay infill, which is a mixture of clay and straw. You get the straw broken up, you make up a clay mix, and then you try and coat all of the bits of straw with that clay, and then it will bind together nicely inside a wall. But it's light enough that you can the straw still creates these air pockets all the way through, which means that it's insulative, like straw bale, except you don't have to deal with the whole bale. Up here in the Pacific Northwest, we can substitute straw bale with chip and slip, which is wood chips. There's tons of wood chips up here. So it's the same thing. Instead of using straw, you just use wood chips. And so it becomes a little bit more affordable than bringing in straw from Saskatchewan, probably, one of the provinces. And then any other fibrous material, hemp, rice husks, if you're in those kind of areas. Yeah, pretty great. The other one is mud brick, or adobe, and basically that's just cob made into bricks, and I think I'm going to talk about that for a little bit before we move on. And other types were earth bag, which I think Bern mentioned before. Earth bag is this, it's like super adobe, it's called. So you have a long bag like a sausage, and you put the earth into it, and then you lay it into the shape of your house, and then tamp it down. And I think I could show an example in a little bit of what that looks like. Round earth, yeah. But all of these mostly include Portland cement as a stabilizer. Okay, natural building elements, and this is some of these things are pretty relevant to tiny houses as well. Breathable walls. So most natural buildings don't have a vapor barrier, and I'm going to talk about that later as well. But you want to have a wall that's breathable. You want the building to breathe with you, and you want the walls to be breathable. Insulation and thermal mass. So let's say if you are somewhere cold, then maybe you want to put straw bale on the back wall, and then cob at the front if you like the look of cob. So I say the back wall as in the north wall, the shady side of the house. You want to insulate that as much as you can. And then if you like this curvilinear, more fanciful sort of design, then you could use cob, which is going to get the sun and help with the heating on that. So that, yeah, using these hybrid styles to suit the orientation. They're super labor intensive. A lot of buildings are, but natural buildings, it's a lot of work. Now, when I talk about cob or clay or anything, then we're going to use a soil test like this. So there's a little graphic there, and anyone who's interested can just Google, soil type or soil test or anything. Basically, you take a soil sample from around your building, wherever you're building, put a sample into a jar, shake that jar up, and then the elements will settle out. And then you can say, okay, this is what we're dealing with on this job site. We're dealing with sand as the bottom layer, this much, silt, which is the stuff you don't really want, clay, and then water. And based on that, you can say, okay, we're going to need to get some aggregate from somewhere, like some rocks, small rocks. Or maybe there's hardly any sand there and we have to get sand. Maybe there's no clay. So this is the way to figure out a good mix. And then generally you're going to do test patches of the cob that you're working with to make sure that it's suitable. Natural building scope. This is a building that I designed for New Zealand, and there was a picture of it earlier. Okay, Giovanni. Thank you too. Good night. I don't know if we need to talk about this. This is an example of a building shape that you could do quite nicely with cob or earth bags, the super adobe. I think I'll keep moving along. Okay, healthy arms. Let's let me see where we're at. Let's take a little break here, if that's all right. I'm just going to use the bathroom. So let's come back in like 5 minutes. That'll be 1:20 p.m. my time. If everyone's okay with that. I'll see you, Betsy. Have to sign out, Betsy. Great. Okay, break. Yes. It seems like some people are leaving, and it seems like a good time to take a break. So I'm going to turn my video off, and I'm going to turn it back on in 5 minutes. Thanks, everyone. Okay. Hey, Loretta. Yeah, it is pretty great that we can watch this back, or you can watch it back. I might watch it back. Do some self-analysis. We lost a couple over the break. Or before the break. I guess there's some people from Europe that are watching. So you live in a 40-foot gooseneck. That's big. 8 foot wide. They're becoming a bit more popular up here in Canada now, for sure. I was having some mic issues at the start. I was changing, muting, blah, blah, blah. I'm assuming everyone can hear me. Yes, you can. Standard width. Big for a tiny, but perfect for me and your daughter. Yeah, for sure. Yep. Okay. Healthy homes. What is a healthy home? And some of these things, I guess, will be recurring themes, but we've just been talking about design, natural buildings, earthships, and myself for a little bit, and now we'll get into this stuff. And these are kind of this is me writing this. So this is what I think a healthy home is. Avoiding harmful ingredients, which is low VOC, volatile organic compounds, low EMF, electromagnetic frequencies. We're going to talk about these things a bit more, and good ventilation. So whether that's mechanical or passive, we'll talk about that more as well. A lot of my clients have existing allergies or sensitivities, so that ranges from fibromyalgia to chronic fatigue to Lyme disease, and everything else around that. Electromagnetic sensitivities. I say a lot of my clients. I'm going to say at least 2/3 of my build clients have something like that, where I'm building them a house to try and create a neutral space for them to then find to find out what their problem is, or just to give them a neutral space so that their body can have somewhere to heal. The tiny house that I've got, or we've got a little property out of town, so the tiny house that we stay in out there is that was at a hospital for a while, Canmore Hospital in BC. There was somebody who was living or was at the hospital forever, and they couldn't find out what was wrong with her. So they rented my tiny house for a while and had it parked at the hospital because this poor woman couldn't be around all of those cleaning products and just the smell of hospital itself. So the idea was that she could have a neutral place while she's still in a safe environment for treatment. So it is possible to create these kind of neutral spaces for yourself within a tiny house context. It doesn't have to be a natural building that's completely natural. You can do these things with a movable building or a normal house. And depending on what kind of thing you're dealing with, see, Jill said that she's got fibromyalgia, which is a tough one. And Jill might correct me here, but I believe there's like 17, classic symptoms for this. And if you've got up to 11 of them, then they say, okay, you've got fibromyalgia, and then you have to deal. I mean, there's plenty of people that have it that aren't reaching all 11 symptoms or whatever, but something like that. So these things are hard to hone in on because there are different layers of problems that you might have with your health. So creating this neutral space is super important. anyone who does have these kind of allergies, I always try and push the self-testing, which is not always the most comfortable thing to do. But the last thing you want to do is create a building that there's something in there that you are allergic to that you did have the opportunity to test beforehand. And that's every single ingredient. So, this, if you don't want to have squeaky floors, you're going to have to use some sort of adhesive. And so testing out adhesives, like if it's the 0-VOC PL construction adhesive glue, they do make one. So like squishing it onto a couple of pieces of wood, gluing them together, letting it dry, because you don't have to be there for that really off-gassy bit. But then like putting it in an envelope or something and like literally putting it under your pillow and testing it out to see how it goes. Just to make sure that you're not going to fill your house up with something that's going to off-gas forever and really affect you. The other one is to try and keep your ingredients or your of the home to a minimum. So it can be quite a process, but certainly worth it for sure. What else? Environmental impacts. And we did talk about that being part of a healthy home. Maybe you don't have any sensitivities, but what you want to do, but your motivation is just to create something that's useful for the climate or the environment, and then that being your motivation instead of the sensitivities thing. It might be an environmental thing. EMF is becoming a bigger and bigger problem. It certainly is. I just got a new phone because it's got a fancy camera on it, and my old phone was junky. It's got a wide-angle lens, and it's epic. And it's 5G. There's not even a chance to not get a 5G phone. So yeah, the first thing that I was doing was trying to find out how I turn that 5G off. So I think we're going to be hearing more and more about EMFs, and I'll talk about them a little bit here. But self-testing ingredient manipulation, great idea actually for anyone, for sure, Betsy. Yeah. I mean, I think generally tiny house builders and clients are just trying to get something built for the cheapest possible price. And I totally understand that. But it doesn't take that much more effort to like do a little bit of research and see what kind of impacts those materials are going to have on you. There's, I should add that at the end, but I'll put down my top 5 kind of healthy home components. Because really, for me, there is just 5. I'm just saying 5, but I'm pretty sure it's about that. Okay, and if you're really into the like the science of the building materials, then there's this living building challenge, and we talked about it a little bit at the start as far as building building guidelines go, or building code, not codes. What's the word I'm looking for? Whatever. But we've got this thing called the Living Building Challenge. There's 7 petals to certification: place, water, energy, health and happiness, materials, equity, and beauty, which is great. It's such an amazing set of principles to be building from. Now, the one thing that that the Living Building Challenge has, it's called the Red List, and the link's not there, so I'm going to add it to my list of links. Link Red List. Really, I don't have the link. I'll get it. But they're very, very scientific in their list of materials. It names all of the chemicals that are in there. So if you're really into honing down the different chemical makeups of products, then it's there on the list. And then they have the list of materials that they use there are lists that are acceptable to use in the Living Building Challenge. If you need to go outside of that list, while you're building, then you have to essentially document it, write to them, say why you're saying that this particular material is going to be used as opposed to another, and then make your case. But the red list is pretty great. Let me see. Self-sufficient, regenerative spaces. Yeah, there's not a lot of these being done. You know what? I say that I'm not up on architecture world. Maybe there is, but there's maybe a handful in Vancouver where I live. It is a tough one. It's a tough criteria to match. Not much. Yeah, I know. I know, Betsy. We'll talk about some of that for sure once we get into building materials with a budget. And it's definitely the thing with tiny houses. So many people are getting into tiny houses just so they don't have to strain their budget or pay off a mortgage. Okay. What about like allergies to straw? Straw harms. We did do some talk about natural building, Steph, but we didn't talk about that being allergic to straw. If you're allergic to straw, then you definitely don't want to be part of the construction because it's everywhere. But all of the straw is actually encased in clay. So I'd say if anyone's got an allergy to straw, it's most likely that it's more like a seasonal style allergy where the particles that are airborne would get up your nose and into your lungs and maybe have a reaction like that. But on a straw bale house, there's no straw that's actually not encased in clay. So that would be a tough one. If you wanted a straw bale home because that was the area that you were living in, that you wanted one but you're allergic, then the easiest thing to do would be to go and take an Airbnb out or something like that in the straw bale home and just see how you go. Okay, we go from that to passive house. Passive house is another building style, and what it is about. I think this video, and I'm assuming it's not going to work like the other one. Passive house is triple pane windows as opposed to double. It's super insulating a building, really thick walls of insulation, making it as airtight as possible. The indoor air quality matches the outdoor air quality, which is in my top 5, one of my top 5 for sure. And also having some sort of a passive heating system, which means that the windows, the glazing on the house is going to be facing the sun. So that's basically a passive house design principles. It's becoming code here in Vancouver. And you'd think it because the government really cares, and I'm sure they do a little bit. But the main reason is Vancouver's one of the most expensive cities in the world, and people are building more and more houses and high rises and all of this kind of thing. And the city had this issue where they would have to essentially flood another dam out of town to create hydroelectricity to bring in enough power for the city. The city would have to expand its power supply massively to deal with the amount of building and construction that's going on here. So instead of doing that, they've just upped the building code to super insulate everything so that the houses that are being built take like a quarter of the energy of the old houses. So I do appreciate the code for that. It's becoming really expensive to build because of these code, like triple pane windows, very expensive, all of these things. But the flow-on effect for society is that we're going to not have to use so much power. So that's kind of it is a very nice outcome. That's Passive House. I think I've got a little bit more about it. Yeah. And I talked about this. Yeah, the gold standard for energy efficiency. I think I covered most of that. This is what the cross section of the window might look like. The three blue lines on each of these profiles is the glass, and then there's also these 3 points of contact to make sure that there's no air movement coming through the frame of the glass. The red thing on the right is a blower door test, so that's a frame that you leave one of the doors open, close all the windows, everything like this, and you put this contraption into the door. It's got a fan on the bottom, that yellow thing, and you blow air into the house. And we've done this blower door test twice now on tiny houses. So I'm in the tiny house, and we've got the blower door on, and you light a stick of incense, and the incense or the smoke will move towards the area that you've got a breach in your vapor barrier or your air barrier. So it's if one of the windows is slightly opened or not completely closed or whatever it is, you'll see that incense run there, and they're basically pressurizing the building. And wherever the air is being lost, you can see it. Sometimes you can see it and address it right away, or sometimes it's just all of the windows might do that a little bit, and then they connect a computer to the fan and they're able to give you a rating and say how much air loss you've got in your house. Then they'll turn the fan in the other direction as well, and it basically gives you another reading. So that's how you test a passive house. But it doesn't have to be a passive house to try this system. Actually, when we ran the fan the other way in one of the tiny houses, because it's such a small room, it's a completely different environment to putting one of these things on a whole house. Yeah, I was inside it when they the fan stopped, and then it started spinning in the other direction to suck air out, and all of our air barrier on the inside started popping the staples and coming in, so we had to scream out to tell them to stop because it's such a small space. The fan was strong enough to kind of mess us up a little bit. The walls are thermally broken. Yeah, much thicker walls. That's passive house. I'm assuming this video is not going to work like the last one. Nope, it's all good. It's just what I was talking about. Oh, that's funny. Well, I guess we were still a little bit into design. We talked about these things before already. Golden ratio. This is this golden mean shape, which is the shape of like a fern leaf, or so many things in nature. Kind of if you're doing an exterior design, and I've been asked to use this formula in some of the window designs, window layouts. Anthroposophical architecture, that's Rudolf Steiner. There's an example of one of his things here, this asymmetric design elements. It's beautiful. Feng Shui, that's this one down here. That's a basic element. You can see a Feng Shui, you can recognize a Feng Shui house because they will have this. There's entire resource books about Feng Shui, but usually they're going to incorporate nature, like trees, water, metal, earth, and fire within that. And I kind of like that. The anthro word is anthroposophical. Is it there? Yeah, anthroposophical. It's not common. It's just a passion of mine. It's a set of principles from Rudolf Steiner's teachings. Is the red list kind of like lead or green? Yes. Yep. It is, Betsy. That's good about Vancouver. Yeah. What else? This one here is an example of parametric design or biomimicry. Well, biomimicry is maybe something like this. I keep bees myself. I've got a couple of top bar hives in the backyard. And honeycomb is amazing. It's the strongest. It's the strongest pattern that we have using the least amount of materials. Unfortunately, it doesn't really fit into our building, the way that we build, usually boxes. But yeah, there's a reason that honeycomb is a pentagon like that. Okay. Now we're switching gears a little bit. That was, I guess, kind of the end of our design stuff. And now I'm going to talk a little bit about trailers and some of the elements of tiny house specifically. So we've got a bumper pull trailer there, deck over, which just means the wheels are under. This is a lot more common in Australia, New Zealand, and I think maybe Europe. The difference, or the reason that it's more common, is because in North America, the wheels that you have to put on a trailer, on a regular trailer, are much bigger than the wheels that are required by code in Australia, New Zealand, and Europe, and I think Japan as well. I've seen a few tiny houses on Bryce Langston's channel in Japan. Goosenecks. In Canada, if you want to build a tiny house that is more than 8 feet, it is going to have to be a gooseneck now. They changed the rules. So my most popular designs are all 10 foot wides. And so I can't sell them in Canada anymore. So most of my clients are from the US, which it kind of makes sense for the exchange rate anyways right now. The one that we just finished was a 10-foot wide bumper pull heading to Vermont, actually. Not sure what else I've got here for trailers. But I guess I was talking to Zach about this a little bit earlier this week. And there is certain trailers that are much easier to build on for tiny houses than others. And I'd say any trailer that's being sold by a regular building company, if you're able to get it's got a VIN number, vehicle identification number, and you can register it and this and that, then the trailer's fine, really, structurally. It's going to be the strongest part of the tiny house. It's more about how it's designed. And this one company, they're called Iron Eagle, and they've got this flange that comes out from the frame. You know what I might do is even do a little share on this. I might go through some of these trailer things, then I'll jump onto SketchUp screen share. See how it goes. But yeah, this is a design that I've done, and we can essentially install and get our services and insulation inside this trailer frame, and usually we're up and out of the frame in one day without having to drill too much steel. So yeah, I'll show you a more detailed version of this. Building on skids. If you've got a budget, who was saying that they're trying to keep within a decent budget? I think maybe Betsy. If you've got a very tight budget, and if it's possible, then ditch the trailer altogether. It's easily, by far, the most expensive part of the build. Although lumber prices are pretty crazy right now, a trailer's going to run you, 8,000, but well, up depending on the size of the house. But let's say my average trailer price for like a 30-foot-ish long trailer is about 8,000 US. You can get a foundation made out of wood for way less than that, and then it gets delivered on a trailer like this. So you can call a company and they'll come and pick up your tiny house and slide it wherever you want. Once it's on the property, you could pull it around with a truck or anything else. So this is a really easy way to save money. And I say build on skids. These are the skids along here. I'm not sure if you can see my mouse, but you can see the photo on the right. You can see 3 like 4x4, and then the photo on the left you can see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 4x4s running the length of the house, and that's the skid portion. And then you just build a regular subfloor above that. So that's an option. If you've got the opportunity that you don't need to have a trailer, then it's huge money saving. Okay, so this is part of the trailer design, which is from the get-go in your tiny house construction is important, which is to stop the thermal bridging. So thermal bridging is when you've got a cold temperature moving through to a hot temperature. So if you imagine the trailer, the steel trailer being exposed to the outside temperature, it's going to be cold, and then it's attached to, for instance, your subfloor, and a lot of people, builders, owner builders, DIY, tiny house people, will just glue their 3/4 inch plywood subfloor directly to their trailer frame. And so what you're inviting there is a moisture transfer. And I think I'm going to see, what's the next slide? Oh, it's the same. Okay. I'm going to stop sharing this one and just open up a SketchUp model. So bear with me for a second. Stop sharing. Now let me see what I can do here. I don't want to mess up my thing. Okay. I'm going to share this screen. Okay. So I do think this is pretty important. Let me see. I'm going to turn off the... I've got ply, half-inch ply. You know what? I'll leave it on. I'll leave these layers on. So this is a trailer. You know what? I'm going to take it out. Pardon me. And where's my joists? Joists. So now we're looking at a pretty standard trailer that I would build on. I sell them up here in Canada as well, but this is a design that I've been working on with my manufacturer for a fair few years now, and we've got it honed in to just the way I like it. So I've got the cross members on the bottom. These are the cross members. Kind of holds the whole trailer together. You've got your main frames through here. It's the second one. That's the one that's attached to the axles that's doing all the pulling. And then the outer frame here, which is what the majority of your tiny house is actually resting on, because that's where you build your walls, right? So this one is, I'm pretty sure what I should say, yeah, 24 foot by 8 foot. A couple of the things that we do is we bend our own wheel wells, and then we support them here. And what this bend lets us do is just to put, like we can sit a bottom plate in the door right on the wheel well without having to put a header in. And I might be getting a little bit jargony there, but that's just part of the construction method. If you're using a trailer that's got regular fenders or wheel wells, then you have to put something here that's strong enough to support all of everything above it, including the roof, potential snow load, or anything like that. Whereas we just build the fenders strong enough to take that load already. And what it lets us do is just sit a door up in this area if we want to. So back to these cross members here. What this lets me do, if we get the trailer like this, and we had one arrive last week, and we got it done right away, is it lets me put in, I'll just go into my layers here, my tags. Come on. Subfloor. Oops, not the subfloor. Ply. So we can just lay plywood right on top of these cross members now. And then we can screw them in from the top. What we actually do is put in Tyvek, which is house wrap. We'll talk about it later. But I put a layer of Tyvek underneath all of that, just as an extra protection. So now we've got this subfloor protected. And we've still got steel here, which is going to be some thermal bridging. So I do have the Tyvek running up and over that, and up here and out. So there's no metal showing. No bare metal showing once we get to this stage. And this stage is like, whatever, a couple of hours. Then the next thing that I'll do is we're going to put in our joists, floor joists. So the floor joists are here, and we screw them onto the side of the frame, and we've got an air gap there. In this case, it is 1/2 of an inch. So this is what our subfloor is going to be attached to, and now we've got a nice air gap between these pieces of metal here and the actual subfloor. If the subfloor is attached, and I'll just turn that layer on for a second. If the subfloor is actually attached, like a lot of people do, to the metal, then there's a chance for everything under here. This metal here is going to be cold, and this wood here is going to be a warmer temperature, and some moisture can occur between the metal and the wood. And if there's moisture between metal and wood, then it's the wood that's going to suffer. It's going to rot, and it can potentially mold. And mold is by far enemy number one, in my opinion, for building. I'm going to take that layer off. Can I? Whoa, I don't want to do that. I'll just turn it off. Oh, okay. 3/4 inch. You see my layers a bit better. Okay, so now we've got our floor joists in. That's nice. We're almost there. Remember, we've got Tyvek over here, but depending on, depending on the client, I don't want to have my frame sitting and floating over this area here. So we put a rain screen around, a 1/2 inch rain screen, it's called. Usually this is pressure treated. So depending on the client, we might not use pressure treated. We might just have the Tyvek protect the metal from the wood. So it'll be underneath this, wrapping around, and we'll just cut strips of 1/2 inch plywood. And so that goes all the way around the perimeter here. So now we've got a stable attachment point for our subfloor. Now I'm not sure what layer I've got on this one. Oh yeah. So the next one that we do, once we get this done, we can invite our electricians and plumbers to come and do it. And usually I'm doing those things in this stage because I'm there and it's usually quick. So we've got services that can go in. It's a really nice thing about having our joists running this way is that it's quite easy to get our services around. We're able to keep them inside our insulated space. The last few tiny houses that I've done, they go into cold climates. So I actually tape underneath these pipes that are in the floor. It's called a heat tape. And the heat tape stops them from freezing, basically. It has to be plugged in. Now this is another element that I use in tiny houses. It's called a HEP-VO. Let me get a link for that for you, if I don't have it somewhere. It's a waterless P-trap. So if the water's coming down here, it's moving through here, and all that's in here is like a bladder that's pinched at this end, so the water can run through and out, but air cannot get back, and water can't get back either. And the advantage of having this style system in your subfloor, it means that it's not able to freeze, because a regular P-trap is going to be, a regular P-trap means that there's going to be water in the bottom of that P-trap, or S-bend, some people call them, like this one over here. Water sits there. The reason for that water sitting there is so that you don't get the gases coming up from your plumbing pipe and into your sink. You don't want to smell your septic inside. This does the same job. So that's what I put under the subfloor. And then, of course, any water lines that I'm running, they want to be on the high side so I can fit as much insulation underneath it as I can. And again, depending on the climate, I'll be putting in heat tapes or heat tape under there, so there's no chance of freezing. Let me have a look. Betsy, what material are the crossbars? Crossbars, everything's metal. It's just a color to the trailer. My manufacturer in the US does them in 2x2 steel hollow section steel, and then my manufacturer in Canada will do it in 1x2, which is quite nice. This is my water out. This is a toilet flange. The S-bend for this is in the toilet. That's what's underneath all that toilet stuff. So that's my services in the floor. And then last thing I'll do is insulate it. Usually for insulation, and we will go into it, but I'll use rock wool, mineral wool, and then on top of that's my subfloor. And now I'm ready to frame. So this is how I build, and I obviously like it. What I was talking about with some of these other different trailer manufacturers, and they do it for a variety of reasons. Sometimes it's because it's easy for them, or it's the materials that they can get most available, or it's just how they build. But Iron Eagle trailers, for instance, they just have a flange out there, and so it's not past your wheel wells, it's over here. I'm just doing it here as an example. But that's kind of what the profile of the end of their trailer looks like. And so it is pretty good for laying your subfloor over the top. You do have to insulate the top. You could do the same as I do. But the problem that I've found with them is that you have to insulate the bottom, and there's nothing to support your insulation. So it just becomes an awkward space to kind of deal with. So yeah, maybe it depends on climate, but just the nature of where I'm building, my focus has to be on reducing thermal bridging. I'm going to stop this screen share. Switch back to the PowerPoint. I hope that made sense. I should look at the yeah. Thanks, Bern. Yeah, I know. There's a lot. I'm covering a lot of stuff here for notes. Should do a book one day. Let's see. So that's the air gap, and I think I explained it. I guess the next question probably Bern's going to ask is how do I attach the trailer or the frame? I just screw down. I know that there's all these kind of brackets that you can buy, and these I can't remember these massive brackets that get drilled through the frame. But there was a fair few years ago that I got my engineer friend, his Manifestations is his company. We talked about brackets, and I don't know if I show them here. I don't. But when you're tying a trailer or the whole tiny house down to the trailer frame, and it has to be secured, obviously, there's a few different ways to do it. You can use a bracket, drill through the steel, and have these rods coming up, and then your big bracket, and you attach to your plywood, your frame. And that's one way that's for sure, like, it totally works. The other way is to get fine thread, self-tapping metal screws. And, that's not quite correct. I drill these in all the way around. The reason I like to do it this way is because I've got a more even distribution of support or uplift on my whole frame instead of just doing it 2 feet from the corners. And this is where the engineering comes in. The kilonewton up strength or up tension pressure of like whatever it is, 20 of these metal self-tapping fine thread screws is the same as 4 of these big brackets that a lot of people suggest on the corners anyway. It is what it is. The reason that I like to do it is because I don't have to burn through drill bits drilling all the way through this trailer frame. I don't have to try and line it up properly. I can build everything and just nail gun it into place and then go around and do all of my structural tie downs from the inside directly into my trailer frame after the fact. So it's just a system that we've been using that is about 10 times faster and 10 times cheaper than the other ones. So, there's what they say, how many other ways to skin a cat? This is just the way that we do it. Steel stud versus wood. I see a lot of uh, comments online about these things. Obviously, with the price of lumber these days, I can totally understand why people use steel studs. They are lighter. Steel studs are lighter. They do have this inherent thermal bridging characteristic that we talked about with the trailers. So if you're putting a steel stud frame in, you really do have to insulate outside of that steel stud to stop that cold temperature transferring all the way to the inside. You're not going to stop it completely, but you'll stop it enough that the moisture transfer is almost nothing. Steel studs are tough to use though if you're after a natural building, because you're going to put, say, tongue and groove on the inside, and you can't put a nail gun through steel studs. I mean, they do actually make one that does, but no one uses that. It's not readily available. So it's not a natural material. So it's not breathable like wood is. But again, if you detail it right, then it's completely fine to use. And like I said, with the cost of lumber these days, that might be one way to save money. Have you tried different trailer setups over the years of your work? I have. I've tried quite a few different setups for trailers. Yep, we can discuss stuff after, Rinka. I mean, I'll be doing. I guess time's kind of moving along, but we'll do some questions before the end. If anyone's after like more of my time, I do do some consulting. I do quite a lot of that actually for people. Okay. Yes, I try to avoid plumbing within inside. No plumbing inside exterior walls. It's kind of confusing, but yeah, I'm trying to avoid that at all costs. I've had to fix a couple of tiny houses that have been built where they were built on the coast and then they were taken in into the mountains, Squamish locally here, but it's still like way minus temperatures, and the pipes froze and cracked in the walls and destroyed. You know, there's nothing that's going to destroy a building more than water damage, maybe fire. but yeah, try and avoid putting plumbing in your exterior walls. I mean, it froze in Texas this year. We just have to accept that this is the reality, I think, at this point. Hemp wool. Helping in a steel stud build lined with hemp wool, kind of natural. Yeah, for sure. Hemp wool. I've actually dealt with hemp wool. It sounds pretty cool. I'd like to try that. Florida, Central Florida? Is that where you are, Betsy? Okay. Roofing. I'm going to talk about roofing a little bit. This is a tiny house that we did a couple of years ago. There's a pretty great video. What's on my website, or it's on Bryce Langston's channel. He's the one that did it. Central Pennsylvania. Cool. This tiny house, we tried to follow the Living Building Challenge. It was a really fun one. We had a lot of our materials came from Habitat for Humanity. Another bunch came from Unbuilders, who is a friend's company who deconstructs homes now in Vancouver. Instead of crunching them into landfill, they actually take them apart and use as many of the components as they can, which is pretty. I guess when anyone thinks about that kind of idea now, and again with the lumber prices, it totally makes sense. Alder Grove Tiny House Workshop, didn't you? Oh, that one. Yeah, we started it at the Small Home Expo. So I'm one of the organizers for the West Coast Small Home Expo, and yeah, we did it as a workshop at that. It was in Abbotsford, close to Alder Grove. Okay, roofing membranes. So we've got standing seam metal. This is what I use always. The reason being is there's no visible screws. So the screws go on this side, and then we put in the next panel, and they click straight over the top. So they come in 12-inch wide or 16 wide. This is one of those things where, let's say we're on a budget, and maybe it's in my top 5. I'm going to put it down. Standing seam. I think my top 5 might be more than 5. It means that you can do your own roof and be 99.9% sure that it's not going to leak, because there's nowhere for it to leak. So if we're doing another style of roof like this, like this one, this is a Sunray Kelly, Barefoot Builder guy. If I was doing a roof like this, or if I'm using regular sort of corrugated metal like this one here, then I would get a roofing company to do it. If it's a single pitch standing seam metal roof like this, no problem, I do it. As soon as we've got gable ends to deal with, like a small gable, and then going to a tall, and we've got this flashing detail down the side, I leave it to a roofer. So that's standing seam metal, corrugated metal we talked about. That's going to have screws exposed. So every time you screw through that, there's a little rubber washer that pushes down, and that's your waterproof seal. And it totally works. But when you're putting in a couple of hundred screws across a roof, the chances of one out of those 200 failing is like much higher than no holes in the roof at all. So I just like the standing seam. Cedar shake roof. This is one of Abel's roofs. Zilvados is his company down in Washington. He builds some epic houses, and like is really pretty great at being conscious with non-toxic materials too. See, just the shape of it, you can sort of see that he's into it. He builds his own windows. He's quite a technical builder. And like me, he's not a high volume producer. He's not trying to take over the tiny house world. He's just doing his thing in an artistic way. It's awesome. You should check out his site. EPDM or torch on. Now, let's talk about the toxicity of these. Standing seam metal roof, corrugated metal, any of the metal roof, including this insulated roof panel, you can collect water off it and drink it, really. I mean, they might not say that it's potable. I think there is one kind of roof that says that it's potable. But if it's a metal roof, you're pretty much good. Asphalt, not a chance. They're everywhere because they're cheap. But you can't collect water off it and really drink it. I mean, it's worse than drinking out of a garden hose. Cedar shake, you could potentially, but that's quite a lot of cedar. There could be a cumulative situation there. EPDM, they do make, that's a pond liner. So the EPDM pond liner, the one that's okay to use for ponds, theoretically you can collect water off it and drink. Torch on, no, but that's another roof style that you could achieve this wild shape with a torch on roof. It's torch on somewhere between EPDM and asphalt. It's a pretty toxic. Slate tile, you don't see that so much anymore. The insulated roof panel is not that common in North America either. You see it in huge warehouses and stuff like that. It's a super effective panel, though. I was looking at ordering a shipping container worth of these because, as I mentioned, I got this little property out of town, and I was just going to order a container of them from China. But our whole distribution system is broken right now, so I'd be paying 3 times more for container than I normally would have. Okay. Yikes, 210. Building envelope. Let's just skip that. This is the building envelope. This is what we're going to wrap our house with once it's built. This is a workshop that we did in Maple Ridge a few years ago. This is on my website. It's called the Eclipse Tiny House. Now, this is the full meal deal, expensive house wrap. It's called Mento. This is a German product. It's breathable. These are the tapes that you'd use for it. It's called Tescon Vanatape. All these products are available from a company called 475.com or .ca. Super nice. The more regular house wrap is called Tyvek, and you just use tuck tape. This is actually also breathable. So essentially it does the same job. It's just not quite as non-toxic as this Mento. I'm usually still using Tyvek. It's just one of those things. If I've got somebody who's really interested in having a completely non-toxic building, then I'll price in the Mento. But the way I look at it my rationale is that as I look at the toxicity of a building, then I want to start from the inside. So I want to have the materials on the inside of my tiny house being the least toxic, and then as I move out through the air barrier to the insulation, and then to my outside walls and my siding, I'm really not as concerned generally with the toxicity. Of course, I'm using stuff that's as inert as possible, but my focus as far as toxicity is on the inside of the building and not so much the outside. So that's my rationale for using Tyvek. It does the same job as Mento at about a fifth of the cost. So, so that's Mento Tyvek tie paper. So these are breathable house wraps. Tar paper. Yeah. Tar paper is pretty old school. But it works. It's tar, so it's going to be way more toxic than Tyvek. You also can't get a very good air seal like this tuck tape on Tyvek. You can tape it up pretty well. The only air loss that you're going to have through it really is the staples, whereas it's a little bit harder to tape up tar paper effectively. So yeah, I'm sure it's cheaper though. It's true. And going with that sort of idea that I was saying of the toxicity from inside out, sure, it works. The next layer of our building envelope is a rain screen. I always include a rain screen, unless I'm putting corrugated metal like this vertically on my siding, because then I've kind of got a rain screen right there. Like the air is able to move through the majority of this profile. The idea with a rain screen is that here's an example here. It's over foam, but whatever. It's not my picture. We've got this air gap, and you can see the air here. Just tell me if you can see the mouse or not. It's using it a lot on these images. This is a special kind of. This is a vented screen here. It's called a bug mesh or a bug. There's bug mesh down here, which is just like that's the cheap version. And this one here is kind of nice because you can drop your rain screen right into that L channel there. You can see the mouse. Thanks, Loretta. So what we've got here in the rain screen is an air gap between our siding and our house wrap, which means any moisture that does get trapped behind there, whether it's just from thermal bridging or if it's a really hot day outside and you've got the air conditioning on inside, whatever the reason is, then that moisture can actually drop. If it's a lot or the air moving through it can clear it out. So again, it's doing a better job for our heating, especially in the case of, well, like if this is heating up or super cold, then you've got an air gap. And air is actually a great insular. So the only thing to be aware of with using it on tiny houses, it can take you over width if you're adding a couple of inches to the trailer. I guess that's one thing to mention back on my trailers is I only ever make them 8 foot wide, never more. Because I use a rain screen and because I like to have a little bit of a fascia board at the top, 8 feet is enough for me. A lot of tiny house trailers are built at 102 inches instead of 96, which is like that's your maximum width on the road. But it means that you've got no room for siding, so that you're building the walls in from the outside of your trailer. And what I like to always have is a positive drain right down. So if you imagine this area here, the concrete is the trailer. If there's water leaving the rain screen, I want it to run directly down past the trailer. If your trailer is already starting out at the maximum width, then you'll have some sort of flashing that you have to install here. So the water would run down, then out a couple of inches, and then down. And I just don't see the point. So hopefully that made sense. Yeah, it's an itty bitty mouse. I should actually see about getting a bigger one. Yeah, the screen's already small as it is. Okay, roof ventilation, same thing. And I think I may have a couple of versions of this. And again, there's like, we're talking about building now. There's a lot of ways to do it. And there's one thing that you'll probably come across if you're working with builders. And I'm sure it's across all kinds of, trades and jobs, but people have this thing where they trash other people's work. This is a typical A-frame roof ventilation system. So you've got a soffit here, a soffit vent. You've got let's say you've got the sun beating down on this roof. It's heating it up. The air in here is wanting to rise, hot air rises. It's going to come out your ridge vent, and it's going to create a draw underneath here. Now, on a tiny house, it's, for me anyways, if I'm doing a vented roof like this, then it'd be more typical that I'm actually attaching this soffit vent to the top of my wall. So where I've got my rain screen coming up the wall here, that cavity, that half-inch cavity, I'm trying to match it up with my roof, or I do match it up with the roof, so that the airflow comes from the wall and then up into the roof, all the way from the bottom. So it's kind of a nice way to do it. I've seen some tiny houses, and I've built a couple of tiny houses that have this typical soffit vent situation. If you're driving in the rain, and we drove one in the rain, this is how I know. Luckily, it was a shell, so it wasn't finished. But we drove it to an expo as a demonstration model. As we were driving, the water sucked up into that roof cavity and was just drenched on the inside. So it's not going to do it when it's stable, but when you're driving down the road at however many kilometers or miles an hour, the rain or the water from the road was sucking up into here and then just dropping inside the house. So there's a lot of things to consider. This is one of my drawings of a roof detail. Let's see, roofing felt, 3/4 plywood, 2-inch centers. So here I've got my siding. There's a rain screen behind there. My blocking here is lower than my rafter, so the air can come up here and then over the top of my insulation. Now it's not showing the other profile of this skylight, but usually I'd be drilling holes here and here. I don't know, the mouse is probably small, but the air will move either side of the skylight and up. And then again, at the top here is where I'd have that ventilation coming out. I'd have a little bit down here so it can flow out this way, like a small half-inch gap. So yeah, ventilating your roof is pretty important. The other option is to use a thermal wrap. So instead of the vent, you can put a full layer of like foam here, or it's called comfort board, and have an unventilated roof, which is kind of nice because you don't have to deal with all of that ventilation detail. But, all of this to say, it's just to make sure that our house is breathing properly. If our house is breathing, then we know it's going to be basically safe. I think I'm going to skip this detail. It's getting a little bit technical. Soffit vents, that's what they look like. Another example of rain screen. This is an interesting ridge vent someone did for their neighbor. Okay, insulation. So I'm going to have to start writing a little bit here. We've got mineral wool, that's my favorite, rock salt. comfort board, but they have a couple of brands now. Hemp bats. I haven't used them, but they seem to be coming, which is nice. Wool. It's not my favorite. Not because it's not a good material. It's amazing. But the wool that we buy in North America is generally Havelock wool. And it's a great product. I mean, it's the most natural out of all of the, well, next to straw bale, but it's got this tendency to slough down in the walls. So using it on a flat surface or a low pitched surface like a roof or a floor, awesome. It's just really painful to install in the walls. It's hard to cut, and you have to staple it along the studs, which means you're compressing it. And if you're compressing the insulation, then it's losing its R value, which is its thermal performance. It's nice to work with in the sense that it's non-toxic, though, so it's a tough one. The reason mineral wool is my favorite is because it's extruded minerals. It's like rock that they go through this manufacturing process, and they're able to fluff it out into a bat that's really easy to cut. It stands up really nicely in the wall. You can cut your electrical sockets and everything around it. It's breathable, and number one, it doesn't have a fire retardant in it, the same as regular fiberglass insulation. And the fire retardant is where the chemical component that you want to try and avoid is. That's wood fiber here. That's great as this thermal wrap that I was talking about. If you imagine you finish the house and you put a whole nother blanket around the house of insulation, so you could use wood fiber, or you could use another Roxol product called Comfort Board. Straw bale we talked about. SIPs, pretty great. It's definitely not non-toxic though. You've got stranded wood board, OSB, compressed into foam in the middle. I've never actually built anything out of SIPs panels, but I appreciate it for what it is. If energy efficiency is your goal, then it's not a bad option. Fiberglass, yeah, there's fire retardant in that. It works. I mean, it's totally an insulation, and it's the cheapest. But that woman there should be wearing a mask more than goggles. Spray foam. We can see what this guy's dressed up in. That's kind of what you have to deal with there. And I think I've got a spiel on spray foam that I've talked about before many times. Reflectix, that's usually used in van conversions or things like that. It's not bad. It's not really, I don't think it even has an R value, but it is a pocket of air, which can be air sealed as well. So sometimes it's a good wrap. If you've got a building that's not breathable, then that could be an option, as well as these polystyrenes. Betsy, my house is SIPs, advantages like everything else. Exactly. Yeah, totally. The one thing is, I keep saying my top 5. If you've got something like SIPs, then you just make sure that you've got a good air exchanger in your house. So if there is any off-gassing, or if it's going through its life, if it's its cycle of off-gassing, then you're just making sure that the air in your house is being refreshed, so you don't have to deal with it. I'll do this spray foam spiel as quickly as I can. Basically, they say that spray foam is a vapor barrier, and that is true for a couple of seasons. If you're using spray foam on steel stud or a shipping container or a van or a bus conversion, so you're spraying it against metal, basically, then it's great. It's stable because it's a dead material being applied to other dead materials. When you put spray foam with wood always expands and contracts with moisture through the seasons. The same as a door gets sticky in winter and then opens up again freely in summer. It's because the door and the frame is expanding. It's got moisture in it in winter. It's just the way it is. So with that in mind, you've sprayed in between your wood studs with spray foam, and it's stable. It's amazing insulation, and the company says there's a vapor barrier. So you start building. You trim it back, flush to the studs, and then you keep going. What happens is those studs are going to expand in winter, and the spray foam will get moved out of the way just a touch. And then in some of those studs will contract again. They'll lose their moisture, and you're going to have these micro cracks between the spray foam and each side of every stud in the house. And so these micro cracks are small enough that they can't actually release the moisture. So the problem with that is there's moisture there, which is either going to mold, break down the wood, or break down the foam and start some sort of off-gassing cycle with the foam. Tons of people like the spray foam, and I get it. On the surface, it's an amazing product. But if you take the surface off after a few years, then it can look like this. It's just not a healthy product to use with wood. So it's a bit of I know that I'm being a little bit alarmist about that, but I really feel like spray foam could be one of our, asbestos kind of building materials that we talk about in years time and say we can't believe we were so silly to use that. Yeah, there's companies out saying that their spray foam's green or they're bio-based or anything. There's accelerant in it. There's a reason that person's wearing a full hazmat suit when it's being installed. So it's just something to look out for. I don't mind using spray foam in a trailer frame because it's steel. And so we've got this dead product with another dead product that doesn't expand or contract, and it's a nice application. So it's more about just understanding the materials that you're using and then using it in the right way. Spray foam. Yeah, amazing tool, isn't it? It's like a skylight. They say there's two kinds of skylights, one that doesn't leak and one that hasn't one that leaks and one that hasn't leaked yet. Hard foam, yeah, it's stable, but you still have to install it into a wall. So if you're gonna put hard foam XPS inside a wall, then are you gonna seal it up with a spray foam, like a can of spray foam that you'd use around windows? I don't know. Yeah, I'd try and avoid spray foams at all, unless I'm in the trailer frame or something like that, and my client's not sensitive to these things. Sheeting. I think I talk about sheeting, do I? Sheeting, I'm usually just using plywood. I'm talking about sheeting the outside of a house. I've done a couple of homes in an Australian style and New Zealand style where I've got our stud wall. I'll just put cross bracing of metal and then attach the metal, which gives us the same shear strength as sheeting. And I have a hunch that might be becoming more and more popular over here because it's over $100 for a sheet of 3/4 inch plywood right now, which is insane. And I think we might start using cross bracing in our walls instead of sheeting in the near future. I'm certainly considering it as a builder. Okay, interior membranes. We've got two kinds here. On the left, that's in my top 5. Intello. It's a German product. It is expensive. But again, there probably is an alternative brand that does the same thing. This interior membrane is breathable. The standard plastic 3mm poly vapor barrier, whatever, it's not breathable. It's not breathable at all. And so, like I've said a bunch of times, I'm trying to have my walls breathable so that any moisture can move through them. We call it hygroscopic. is when moisture can escape from a wall. So this is we don't really call it a vapor barrier anymore. It's an air barrier. So it's taped up well, and the idea is that we don't have any air leaks, but it can breathe a little bit. This one's not breathing. So it's about 5 times more expensive than poly plastic, but we are in a tiny house, so it's pretty high up on my suggestion list. This is pretty typical if anyone's done any renovations. This is how that poly plastic, this is how it can show up later. Let's say you're in a tiny house, you've got a Christmas party, and there's a whole bunch of people breathing in and out all the moisture from our lungs. And so the moisture that's in the air is going in behind your walls, and it's hitting this impermeable plastic, and it's dropping to the floor. See this in bathrooms and kitchens and stuff a lot. But in a tiny house, you're basically talking about that size room anyways. And so you've got, we call it an indoor rain event. You can't see it, but there's actual moisture dropping behind your wall on your vapor barrier, and it makes its way down, obviously, behind your baseboard, and can start doing this. This is drywall. There's not a lot of people drywalling their tiny house. But this is the danger zone here as far as your health goes. There's mold is a huge problem for buildings and for people inside them. So yeah, that's why I'm all into the Intello and not a regular vapor barrier. Yeah, I do put humidistats in a lot of my bathrooms and tiny houses, just so if you forget to put the fan on, it's like senses the humidity and it turns on itself. It's a normal switch, but it's got a sensor in there called a humidistat. I'm going to put that in my healthy products list. Okay, windows. Ideally not aluminum, unless they're thermally broken. It's just another thermal bridging issue where you've got a cold temperature outside, a warm temperature inside, and you've got an aluminum window. So the cold temperature is going to be moving through there, and at some point around the frame, usually inside your wall, it's going to drop moisture. It's called a dew point, and I'm not going to get into trying to explain dew point, but aluminum windows are the worst for that. Vinyl windows don't have that same thermal bridge characteristic. They last a really long time with no maintenance, and they're actually the cheapest. So this is one of those materials where my politics around sustainable products and my green kind of mentality, I go towards this vinyl window. The greenest window to put in, or the most sustainable, was going to be wood. But wood's wildly expensive unless you're getting them reclaimed or salvaged. They do require maintenance, and they can still sweat and have these kind of air leaks. Whereas a vinyl window it's completely welded shut. It's a vinyl weld. Vinyl's, I don't think it's on the red list. It's it's not true. They sell a vinyl window now that is able to be in the Living Building Challenge, but vinyl is a pretty dirty material, like concrete. Window styles, whatever you want. Yeah, awnings are nice if you want to have a window. If you want to keep a window open because the rain doesn't come in as easily. The tilt and turn ones aren't really that practical for tiny houses. I've done them, and having a window opening in on a tiny house is like pretty brutal for space. But yeah, most common is going to be a horizontal slider or a double hung, the bottom two on the right. It's just some examples. Another reason I like the vinyl windows, on the right there you can see It's got a nailing flange, so it gives me a nice flat area to install that window onto my house wrap, and I can get a really good seal around there. Then on the inside, where I've got that gap around my frame, it's called the rough opening, and my window is usually a little bit less. I use wool, so I'll just pull wool off my. I've got a bag of wool left over from jobs that I've done out of wool insulation, and I always use wool around the window frames. It's tempting to get in there with spray foam, but again, I just don't trust the stuff. It's made by the same companies that drop bombs on Syria and everywhere else and make chemical weapons, and I'm just like not super into supporting their product. Cabinets, yeah, I don't mind using IKEA cabinets. Again, they're working. It's a global company that's basically working from European standards. So the toxicity on IKEA cabinets is probably going to be lower than custom cabinets that you'd get in North America or probably anywhere else. They're also fairly well sealed as far as the doors and stuff go. If you're really sensitive to stuff, go grab a IKEA cabinet from their like bargain section or a panel or something and be with it for a while. But yeah, I'm not super worried about IKEA stuff, and they are actually quite a good kitchen generally. In saying that, the last few clients that I've built for who wanted just the most natural tiny house that they could get, we used a product called Pure Bond plywood. In Canada, you can only get it at Home Depot. They seem to have the rights for it, which is kind of cool. But it's a formaldehyde-free plywood. So it doesn't have it's very hard to get it to a point of looking as good as a IKEA or a regular cabinet, because you're just dealing with a different kind of plywood, and whatever the binding agent is there, that's the formaldehyde free glue, it kind of makes it a bit fuzzy. Like it's hard to get it like a really smooth surface. You have to work hard at it. But the cabinets that we've done have got their own feeling. You know, it's not. It does feel like a much more natural product. And you know, you can still paint them and all of those kind of things. Usually, I've been painting. If it's just a wood look that you're looking for, then I'm using Osmo oil. Again, I'll get some links here. And then the regular paint, as far as colors that I'm using Dunn Edwards paints. A lot of these non-toxic materials that I'm getting, I get from, or finishes I get, are from Greenworks Building Supply in Vancouver. So you can check out their website. You know, most of the stuff you can still buy on Amazon if you want. But yeah, that's what I'm been doing with my cabinets. How's my time? Week. People in plywood at Home Depot. That's correct, Bern. Yep, Home Depot. They've got a few different kinds as far as sizes, like 1/4 inch, 1/2 inch, 3/4 inch, and then they've got aspen or I can't remember the other wood they use, but they're quite good. Yep. Yeah. Yeah. It's got the look of unfinished birch. You know, if you're getting birch plywood, my cabinet maker uses birch for anything that's not pure bond. He's like, whenever I get him to do pure bond, he's like, oh man, you know, he doesn't like using it because he likes the finished birch. It already comes with a really nice coating on it, you know. But whatever. Natural flooring, there's tons of options for that. I'm not really going to give too many recommendations for actual flooring products because there's just a million different kinds. If you're after the most natural flooring possible, then and I'm not sure what happened to the images on these, but just use fresh fir or oak or something, like no pre-finish on it or anything. T&G flooring that's a natural wood, and then you'll have to sand it down and coat it with a non-toxic flooring coat. So I use Osmo. It's not to say that Osmo's got no smell, but it's natural oils, and it seems to be the most hard-wearing natural flooring you can you can use. You can use linseed oil and this and that as well. Linseed oil's also, it's like cedar. It's got a really strong odor. Again, it's not to say that it's not natural, but you're not going to be painting your floor and going in there and spending a night after even a week of linseed. You need to give it some time to off gas. Richlite or paper stone for cabinets or countertops. Yeah, I've used paper stone for countertops. It's beautiful. Yeah, it's got a price tag with it for sure. And Richlite, I can't remember. I guess that would be cabinet material. I don't know. With the countertops, usually I'm going with granite. Just it's the most hard wearing. It's heavy, so if weight's an issue, then it's a thing. Paper stone's great as well. But yeah, there's barely anything in those kind of countertops. Quartz, granite, they're basically just getting polished and then get like a sealer on it. And because they're countertops, usually they're using a food grade sealer. So yeah, I do like that the most. And then after that, I'll get slabs of wood, and use the Osmo on them, which I've done in the last couple as well. It's funny, there's quite a few. You can buy some really nice countertops now that are wooden countertops from like Lowe's or Home Depots or this and that. Again, it just depends on your toxicity sort of stresses. Oh man, we're into this as well. Propane appliances. So this has got to do with indoor air quality, and I think propane again might be one of these other. Let me say, I've read a few articles lately that are saying that propane appliances, especially cooking appliances inside, are just not good for our health at all. And there's articles about everything, so it's the user's choice really. But I'm shying away. I'm shying away a little from propane. I like cooking with propane. I think in my ideal tiny house, I would have still have a propane cooktop and maybe an electric oven. But again, that's my personal preference. It's like, are you going to worry about the toxicity of your house or enjoy it? So this is balance again of wherever you're at. That's just to do with my personal preference of cooking. If I'm going to put a propane appliance in there, I want to make sure that it's doing a really good job venting out. So a lot of people buy hot water heaters that are more designed to sit outside, and then they put them inside. So I'd like to have something that's direct vent or a power vent. Sorry, direct venting, so that your intake is fresh air from outside, and then it's also being vented out as well. That's something to look into as far as the type of appliance that you're using for propane. But apart from that, they do create a fair bit of moisture. There's we've got these carbon monoxide detectors and stuff like that to make sure that we're not getting poison. But it's the stuff that's at the lower level cumulative sort of exposure that those carbon monoxide detectors are not picking up. If they did, they'd just be going off all the time. So there's something in this. If propane, if you have concerns about it, then it's worth looking into. Again, I don't really have strong opinions about it, because it is a really useful. It's a really useful for heating loads, heating water, heating your house. Yeah, mostly heating water. To heat water with electricity, especially if it's an on-demand system, it takes an enormous amount of electricity to heat it instantly, whereas propane does that very well. If you've got room in your tiny house to have a hot water tank, an electric hot water tank, then it's like kind of like trickle charging a battery. It doesn't take a lot of electricity, and yeah, if you have space for it and if you have available electricity, it's way better than going to collect propane all the time. So it's kind of a nice way to heat water. If you're only in your tiny house every now and again, you don't want to heat water for no reason sitting inside your tiny house. So on-demand water heaters are kind of nice too. So there's a whole bunch of decisions to make around that, and it's always when it gets kind of to crunch time when I'm starting to talk to clients about this stuff, because you kind of need to know what your power sources are, where your tiny house is going to get parked, so that you can make the right decision. If it's off grid, then generally you're going to have to use some propane appliances for your water heating. But depends on where you are in the world and all these things as well. Okay, my favorite one. It's definitely in my top 5. It doesn't have to be Lunos. It's just the one that I use mostly, and it's a nice example. So it's called an HRV, heat recovery ventilator, and it's got some chocolate energy. This is the lungs of the building. The way that it works is, if you buy a Lunos system, there's 2 of these fans that come with it. So you can see one end of the house and one at the other end of the house. It's a regular style house. They got 4. A tiny house 2 is plenty. My tiny house, I've got 1. So I'm cheap, but and it's a really small tiny house. But the way it works is, one of these fans will breathe in, so the fan will be blowing air in from outside, and the other one will be breathing out. So what happens is, this is the inside here. The air is going to, I might even have a better graphic. Nope. Outside air is moving through this porcelain baffle here, and through the fan, and then it's blowing air in. Now, when it breathes out, which is every 70 seconds or so, these fans change directions, each one. So when this breathes out, the warm air that you've spent money heating up inside your tiny house moves through. It heats up this baffle and then expels the air to the outside. So it gets rid of your warm, stale, and possibly moist air. So it's also somewhat of a moisture control. All of the fans are designed to have a 5-degree slope, so the moisture can drip out. Because when you run hot air through this baffle, there's going to be a heat exchange. Okay, thanks, Lisa. I might go long. I'm looking at the time, and if it's being recorded, hopefully that's fine. Yeah, they are much more trendy. Okay. So the way this, we've just breathed out our warm air, our warm, stale, possibly moist air. And this fan changes direction again and breathes the outside air back in, and it's heated up by this baffle. There's 2 kinds of Lunoses. One's long and one's short. So that the amount of air that you're able to heat up, let's say we've got a 0 degrees temperature outside and a 20 in. If you're breathing this air back in after this coil's been heated up by it breathing out, the 0 degrees temperature is actually coming in at like 18 degrees, which is amazingly efficient. So you're not just blowing the hot air right out of your house, You're breathing it out through a set of lungs and then pulling it back in warmer than what it is outside. It's a really great system. They do have filters now, and they've upped the power on the fan a little bit to accept these filters. A MERV 18 will filter smoke and pesticides. So it's pretty great. The one that we just put in the latest tiny house that we did, it's a bigger tiny house, and they're in an area in Vermont which has got like it's corn and crop spraying and all this stuff, and they really wanted a really solid filter. So we used a Venmar system, which is about the same amount of money as the Lunos, but it's much bigger, and we're able to duct some different outputs and inputs around the house. So there is a few different HRVs, but I highly recommend using some sort of ventilation system, mechanical ventilation in your house. I don't buy. There's so many people that say, "Oh, we just open a window," and I don't really buy it. Not in winter. People like to be warm, and you just don't want to breathe in stale air, especially in such a small space. Okay, bathroom moisture. This image on the right, the image on the left is what they do in New Zealand. It's pretty smart. You just put a shower dome over your shower, so all that moisture isn't just leaving the shower. Yes, it gets steamy in the shower, but whatever. All the moisture is contained within your shower. You still have a fan on the wall, but you're not dealing with every single bit of condensation that's in the shower, basically on the outside. So my version of this in North America, and this one I've done over a tub, is that I've got a piece of sheet metal on the ceiling. I've cut a slope into the ceiling so that it has a chance to run down. I also put the ceiling fan inside the shower, which to regular building code is not allowed. It's one of those things where another builder would see and say, "Whoa, you can't do that." I'm assuming that people that live in tiny houses are a little bit more connected to reality than the average Joe, and that you're not going to run a bath full of water and then reach up to try and service your ceiling fan. This is why we have the codes, because someone made a really stupid mistake at some point. So I'm just more into we don't have those codes in tiny house. They're not as detailed. There's nothing to say that you can't do this in RV code, which is really as far as the systems go in a tiny house is what we're going from. And in regular building code, we have way more rules because it's for all of society. It's not to say that they're stupid. It's just that that they have to be they have to account for stupid people. Anyways, I'm trying to keep the moisture in this area with the curtain here, and then the fan where most of the moisture is. So that's what I'm trying to do for moisture control. The other thing I'll do is when I put the TNG in, the tongue and groove, my flooring there, or if it's just a ceiling, then as long as the client's okay with it, I'll put silicone between all of my TNG joints. And so moisture can't get up through the TNG in my bathroom areas. The other moisture area that we're trying to avoid is the bed. So there's a couple of examples here of how to make sure that you're not losing all your loft space by using a box spring or some sort of bed base. But depending on the way that you've done your loft flooring, you can actually integrate your floor into the bed base and still have some airspace underneath your mattress so that you don't have this moldy situation or creating moisture under your mattress. So this is one from a New Zealand company called Build Tiny. They build some really nice stuff. They do a lot of steel stud framing in New Zealand because it's cheaper, stronger, lighter. They're set up for it. And so this is a built-in bed base in the loft floor. And then this is one that I did at a natural tiny house that I did. Again, I'm using this bed slat as the subfloor, and it keeps the attic or that subfloor ventilated in itself, but it's also doubling as moisture control for your mattress. Okay. I'm probably going to go a little long here because I don't want to just stop in the middle of nowhere. So anyone who wants to stick around, please do. And otherwise, you could watch it later. And hopefully, yeah, just go for it. Thanks, Zach. EMF. We were talking about this on and off during the chat. Electromagnetic frequencies. This is what they look like over here. This is like a thermal or like an image of an EMF radiation field. The closer you get to the wire, the hotter it is, or the more frequency that's going to be emitted, and then it becomes less, obviously. The same as this Wi-Fi router in this house. It's emitting Wi-Fi signals all around, and maybe if you're in this corner of the living room, your signal's going to be pretty low. And everyone's familiar with that. They say that a safe distance to stay away from a Wi-Fi router, generally speaking, is 3 meters. So you want to keep it away from your beds if you can. And mine's like all the way over there, and I've got it on a. Where is it? I'll show you. I've got my router on a switch. It's just one of these remote switches that plugs in over there, and then I can just press it off. Like as soon as I'm out of the office, or before I'm going to bed, I can just turn it off from anywhere in the house. It's a really easy hack to just make sure you're not being irradiated by Wi-Fi signals all the time, especially the strong one, which is the one in your house. It's not to say that the apartments across the street aren't sending signals over here 24/7, but try and reduce the amount of radiation that you've got. This is what a cell phone signal looks like as you're talking on the phone. If it was a child, it goes all the way through their head. So that's why I use these like all the time. I barely ever put a phone up against my head. I'm just not really into it. If I do have to do it, I find myself like totally sweating on that side of my head, and it just doesn't. It seems weird. And the new one with regards to all this stuff is 5G. It's pretty untested technology on humans, and there's no one that's going to deny the fact that the radiation field on 5G is way stronger. That's the reason that they like it. You can get huge bandwidth, and yeah, they're suggesting that pregnant women should stay away from 5G because it's essentially like a microwave. It's able to heat up the cells inside your body way more than a regular Wi-Fi does. So it's an interesting human experiment that we're in, along with a lot of other things. But the idea of having 5G towers up and down every street is pretty crazy, if you ask me. Another simple way to reduce your electromagnetic frequency is to use LED lights, especially underneath your bed. So if this is the bedroom up here, there's a loft and a cross section of a tiny house. If your bed is right here, then it's nice to put in DC lighting. So it's not just LED, but it's DC, 12 volt, low voltage lighting. It just doesn't have the same electromagnetic frequencies. It just doesn't have the same electromagnetic radiation as AC. So we've got AC, alternating current, and DC, which is a direct current. And so let's say you're using regular lighting through here, then you might have a transformer here and then a 12 volt light, a transformer here and a 12 volt light, transformer here, transformer here. And so you've got all these transformers under your bed, all with the similar radiation field as this right here. So this is what we're trying to avoid with our lighting design. And this is just one of my drawings, and I've always got this note there. It's on my electrical drawings and then throughout, just as a reminder to the electrician. If wiring is needed around within like 1 meter of the bed space, try and keep it to DC. That's the idea. 1 second. I'm going to mute myself. I've got a little humor. Thanks, everyone. So that's where my suggestion on lighting goes. Out, please. Yeah. Let's see here. Right. I could talk about lighting for a while. So yeah, LED 12 volt. I'm going to go back here. So if you're running a system that's 12 volt, maybe you've just got regular power coming to your house, then I would run these 12 volt lights, the feed for them, and then the transformer is going to be away down here somewhere or in one of these kitchen cabinets, something like that. As far as the lighting goes, and it's some people are totally affected by the frequency of LEDs. So I'm not saying they're the be all and end all. LEDs, some people like seizures and stuff. There's a certain frequency that's with LED lights that is unavoidable. So some people just have to use regular lighting, and that's cool. But if you are using LEDs, make sure you get the warm white. And if you're really getting into it, then you can look at the CRI. Most LED lights will have something here. If they don't, then just assume that it's bad. A high CRI percentage, as in like 85, 90, 95 would be amazing. This is a color rendering index. And what that is it's if we look at the spectrum of light during the day, morning light to evening light and everything in between, it's able to produce about 95% of that natural light. And it's not to say that in the morning it's going to be more dimmed and then it will change in the evening. It's just talking about the spectrum of color during the whole day and how much of that the light bulb is able, or the LED is able to emit. So it's a more natural light. I do like to put dimmers on all my lighting, except for a couple here. Sorry, recommended CRI will be 85% or more. 85% CRI. But dimmers do or can create dirty power. So you can get power filters for dimmers. The one thing that I do when I buy these RV dimmers and I retrofit them, and I don't think I've got any here to show you, but I just make sure at a minimum is my dimmer is on the load side of the switch. So the power comes into the switch and the switch is off. That means the dimmer's off. So the power comes in, it's switched. When I switch the lights on, then the dimmer engages. Some of the dimmers that you buy, the power comes into the dimmer first, and it's the dimmer that's like turning the power on and off, which means that the dimmer's always on. So yeah, it's like there's a small like wiring thing to look out for, or maybe try and explain to your electrician that you want the dimmer to be on the load side of the switch, not the line side of the switch. If that makes sense. Okay. Salvage materials. Can we get electric plugs that we can turn off like in Europe? I know. It's funny, eh? Yeah. In Europe and Australia, and yeah, New Zealand, England, sockets, like wall sockets, all have switches on them. Here, you just plug it in, it's always on. I don't know. I have never seen them. I've never actually seen them. Good question. But, I mean, here you just have to unplug. It is an interesting one. I don't know why they're so different. Okay, salvage materials. We'll talk about this a little bit. We've gone through some. Trailer, I wouldn't suggest it. I've built on some RV trailers. They're usually not rated the same weight as what a tiny house is going to be. So when I have built on them, we've tried to go as low weight as we can, and it's still going to go over. So if you're buying like a used flat deck or something, like a proper car carrying trailer or something like that, go for it. But it's a bit sketchy to buy an RV trailer or an RV and then like take the RV off it and then build a tiny house on it, because they're just way heavier. They're not rated for that. Windows and doors are a great thing to try and salvage because they're way cheaper. The hard thing is that you have to get them basically salvaged before you can finish off your design. So you can get a basic design done. It's a good idea because you want to know how big your tiny house is and what sort of windows you want to salvage. But the chances of getting like certain sizes that are going to fit within your small tiny house rooms are pretty greatly reduced when you go into somewhere like Habitat for Humanity. So it's like this is the potential sizes. It can be tricky. It's not to say that it's impossible. Siding's a great one to salvage. Interior walls, depending. There's actually, I've been doing these ceilings and I really love them. There's a few examples on my website, but it's these oak floors that come out of Vancouver houses, again from this company called Unbuilders. So instead of using the Intello vapor barrier, it's by the same company, 475. It's called Invis, and it's a black vapor barrier. So we put that up on the inside, and then you've got this architectural look where you can just have strips of material, which again makes it easy when you're salvaging because you can just cut stuff up. You don't need perfect profiles of TNG or anything to fit together. And you've got this black gap that you can see between your pieces of wood. If you have a look on my Jawa tiny house on my website, or that one with the curvy roof that I showed earlier, which is it's called the Huga. There's some examples of that. It's nice for using for salvage materials because it means you don't have to have uniform profiles on your wood. Flooring, sure. There's like, again, if the toxicity is out the door. There's a million kinds of flooring that you can get from Craigslist or Facebook Marketplace or whatever. There's always people who are doing flooring that have boxes left over, super cheap. And kitchen cabinets too, actually. There's tons of people giving away kitchens. So all of this to say, if they're going to affect your design and you might need to spend more time, working on retrofitting it. Talked about that. I didn't talk about compost toilets, but I can. Let's see. I've got a slide. You know what? It doesn't make no difference. The composting toilet that I use the most is the Separate. The reason I like it is it's got enough capacity for like a family, like a normal amount of capacity. It's also got the urine diversion, which means the pee is going off with your grey water, and then your poop is it's like in a bag. It's like 40 uses or something like that, they say in the manual, before you have to get rid of it. I know some people just put it in the garbage, but yeah, the best way is to have a humanure system. There's some good examples of humanure systems on a website called eco-sense.ca, and I'll check that and get the link for you. But it's Gordon and Baird, who are amazing permaculture people. They're a couple in the Highlands in Victoria on Vancouver Island. They're also local members, and they're just doing amazing work on natural building and as elected representatives of their area. But they've got some great examples, and I think even downloadable plans for human toilets that you can make yourself. So like vented boxes, and this and that. They're very scientific in their approach, which I appreciate. So that's good. What else about composting toilets? Yeah, if you're able to incorporate the urine diversion with it, then it also diverts the smell. If you've got pee and poo together, that's manure. Sorry, that's sewage. But with pee and poo separate, that's not sewage anymore. The smell is like very little if you're able to separate them, mostly. So that's what I would have to say about composting toilets. If you're lucky enough to be in an area where you're able to use them, awesome. That's great. Any other questions? Didn't do too bad for time. I didn't get a lot into finishing materials. So I guess I talked about Osmo and some paints, stuff like that. On the image there, you can see an example of this ceiling that I'm talking about with the Invis oak. So behind there is a black interior vapor barrier and these strips that we can just staple up to the ceiling. I really like how it looks. Thanks, Jill. Thanks for coming. Thanks for spending your Saturday. I know it's rainy here, so it wasn't a bad day to be in front of my computer. I do design and build, yeah. So I'd say if I separate it for time or if I separate it for income, but I'd say I spend half my time on designs for people, and then through that design process, sometimes it turns into a build, and sometimes I just do the construction drawings for them, and then they build it. Like a lot of my design clients are nowhere near me here, so I'm doing them for people in Australia, New Zealand, and North America mostly. So the way that my process works with that is we start off with a 3D model. So you've got to do some homework and figure out the floor plan. Then I'll do a 3D SketchUp model similar to the trailer. It's like it gives you a good idea of the concept, and by doing that, we figure out the kinks, and then from that, I go to like the second stage, which is well, from the model, I know how much time it's going to take me to produce a set of construction drawings, and so we move. That's the stage 2. So I produce a set of construction drawings, and then that lets me price out in real complete detail what the build would cost. After the first stage, I can give you a ballpark of what the tiny house that you're wanting to build costs. But the construction drawings let me really hone in on all of it, and so then that sometimes turns into a build, and sometimes it doesn't. And sometimes other builders use my plans, which is fine. I'm not precious about that. My workshop's in Rosedale, so it's just the next little part of it's the end of Chilliwack there. I work with a really great family over there. Thanks, Betsy. Thanks, Neil. Any safe LEDs, or do they all affect seizure-prone people? Good question. Don't know. That would be a good one. I'm gonna have a look into that. I doubt it. LEDs are light-emitting diode, and diodes work by turning on and off. So I think that might be. I don't know if it's possible. There might be some weird filter that I don't know about. Let's see here. It's Betsy. Thanks, Loretta. Yes, healthy lives. Thanks, Steph. Awesome. Thanks, Bern. It sounds like we might cross paths at some point. Thanks, Bennett. I'm glad you enjoyed it. I think I'll probably sign off. There's still 50 people. If there's any last questions, I'm here. Sunshine Coast. Yeah. You know what? Most people just park it. It's tiny houses are like RVs. It's RVs everywhere that people are living in. But I know it's much more of an investment in a tiny house and building it and everything, and then to possibly be moved along. But I know there's tons of them on the Sunshine Coast. And Sunshine Tiny Homes is up there, um, doing their building, and a lot of those stay local, so they're around. You'll be sending a link to the recording. Yeah, what I'll do is I'll send an email to Zach with some of these links in it. I'll have to do some homework, but I'll send that to him, and I'm sure he has a way to pass it on either at the video or however that looks. Ontario has Kitchener Don't Need Things in Hamilton, I think. Yes, they're working on some zoning stuff. That's right. Cool. Well, that 3 hours went pretty fast for me. Hopefully it wasn't too much of a drag for everyone else. But I'm so glad I could be helpful to everyone that signed up. And I'll probably see you at the next tiny house conference that Zach and Jason put on. And yeah, otherwise, feel free to go over to my website and sign up for the newsletter there. I don't send out much. I'm pretty slack with that. But I do run in-person workshops which get way more into the building aspect, like the physical building of tiny houses, as well as what we did here today. So if you're going to sign up, I could easily give you a discount on the course because you've done so much of it here already, or at least quite a bit of day one. And then once this COVID weirdness is behind us, then I'll probably get back into doing some in-person actual build workshops, which are always super fun. So maybe I'll catch up with you guys there. Thank you very much. Thanks, Zach. Thanks, Jason, for keeping this thing going. And I'll see you all in a bit.